The train was already pulling away when Clara understood what was happening. She stood on the platform with her carpet bag clutched in both hands, watching the last car rattle into the white distance, and the cold hit her like a fist. Not just the Wyoming wind, though that was brutal enough to steal her breath, but the cold realization that Marcus Pemberton wasn't coming back. He'd kissed her hand 20 minutes ago, told her to wait right there while he checked on their luggage, promised he'd be back before she could count to 100. She'd counted to 5,000. The platform was empty now, except for her and the station master, an old man with a face like dried leather who kept glancing at her sideways, the way you'd look at a stray dog you didn't want to feed. "Miss," he finally said, not unkindly. "Train's gone." "I can see that. You got people meeting you?" Clara's throat was tight. "I thought I did." The station master sucked his teeth. "Thought. That's a dangerous word out here." He pulled his coat tighter. "You got money for a hotel?" She had 17 cents and a train ticket back to Philadelphia that was worthless because she'd already used it to get here. Marcus had promised to handle everything else. Marcus had promised a lot of things. The station master was still waiting for an answer. "No," Clara said quietly. "I don't." He sighed like he'd known this was coming. "Well, welcome to Black Hollow, I guess. Try the boarding house on Center Street. Mrs. Kellogg sometimes takes charity cases." The way he said charity cases made it clear what he thought of her situation, what everyone would think. Clara picked up her bag and started walking. Black Hollow wasn't much of a town. One main street carved through frozen mud, wooden buildings crouched against the wind like animals trying to stay warm. A general store. A saloon with broken shutters. A hotel that looked slightly less miserable than the rest. Everything was the color of old bones. The boarding house was at the far end, a sagging two-story structure with smoke trickling from the chimney. Clara climbed the steps and knocked. The woman who answered had the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. "We're full." The station master said, "I know what he said, we're still full." "I can work," Clara said quickly. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes. Can you pay?" Silence. Mrs. Kellogg started closing the door. "Then I can't help you." "Please." The word came out harder than Clara intended, almost angry. "I just need one night. Just tonight. I'll figure something out tomorrow." The woman studied her with eyes that had seen this scene before. Another desperate girl with nowhere to go. The frontier was full of them. "Figure it out somewhere else," Mrs. Kellogg said, and shut the door. Clara stood there for a long moment, staring at the peeling paint. Her face was numb from the cold. Her feet ached. She'd been awake since yesterday morning, riding a train into this frozen wasteland because Marcus Pemberton had written her letters full of promises. Letters about the beautiful house he was buying, the life they'd build together. How she'd never want for anything again. She'd believed every word. The wind picked up, cutting through her coat like it wasn't even there. She needed to find shelter before dark. Needed to think. Needed to... "You're the one got left behind." Clara spun around. The man standing behind her was tall enough to block out the fading daylight. Broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a hat pulled low. She couldn't see much of his face, but what she could see looked hard. Weathered. The kind of face that didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I don't know what you're talking about," Clara said. "Sure you do. Whole town saw it. Fancy city fellow stepped off the train with you, then got right back on without his luggage." The man's voice was low and rough, like gravel underfoot. "That luggage being you, I'm guessing." Heat rushed to Clara's face. "That's none of your business." "Didn't say it was. Just stating facts." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You got a place to stay?" "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." Clara lifted her chin. "I said I'm fine." For a moment they just looked at each other. The stranger's eyes were pale in the fading light, gray or maybe blue, she couldn't tell, hard to read, but there was something in them that wasn't mockery. Wasn't pity either. "There's a saloon down the street," he said finally. "Owner's name is Dutch. Tell him Rhett sent you. He might have work." "Work? Washing dishes, cleaning tables? It's not pretty, but it's a roof." Clara knew exactly what kind of work saloons offered desperate women. She'd heard the stories, seen the girls back in Philadelphia who'd taken that path and never found their way off it. No thank you, she said coldly. The man, Rhett, shrugged. Suit yourself. But it's going to be 20 below tonight, and nobody else in this town is going to help you. He started to turn away, then paused. Unless you'd rather freeze to death on principle. Maybe I would. That got something like a smile out of him. Barely. Just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. You got spine anyway. That's something. He walked away, boots crunching in the frozen mud, and Clara stood there watching him go. She was cold and exhausted and so angry she could barely breathe. Angry at Marcus for lying. Angry at this town for being exactly as cruel as she'd feared. Angry at herself for being stupid enough to believe that someone like Marcus Pemberton would actually marry a schoolteacher from a working-class neighborhood. The sky was darkening fast. She could already feel the temperature dropping. Clara picked up her bag and headed toward the saloon. Cheats. Dutch turned out to be a barrel-chested man with a beard like steel wool and a voice that could crack timber. He looked Clara up and down when she walked in, taking in her good coat, her city shoes, the carpet bag that screamed, "I don't belong here." Rhett sent you? Yes. You know what kind of work I'm offering? Washing dishes, Clara said firmly. Cleaning tables, nothing else. Dutch raised an eyebrow. Rhett tell you to say that? I'm telling you that. He grunted, something like approval in his eyes. Fair enough. 20 cents a day, plus meals. You sleep in the back room. It's small and it smells like old beer, but it's warm. You steal from me, you're done. You cause trouble with the customers, you're done. You miss a shift without good reason, you're done. Understand? I understand. Good. Start now. The back room was everything he'd promised. Small, smelly, barely big enough for a cot and a wash basin. But it had a door that locked and a stove that worked. And after hours of thinking she might die on a frozen street, it felt like a miracle. Clara dropped her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Oak. The first week nearly killed her. Not the work itself, though that was brutal enough. 12-hour shifts washing dishes in water that turned her hands raw. Scrubbing floors on her knees until her back screamed. Hauling buckets of dirty water through the back door, trying not to slip on ice. She'd never worked this hard in her life. But it was the way people looked at her that really cut deep. The women in town crossed the street when they saw her coming. Mothers pulled their children closer, like whatever bad luck Clara carried might be contagious. Even the men who weren't customers at the saloon treated her like she'd already fallen into whatever pit they assumed women like her ended up in. Just ignore them, Dutch advised when he caught her crying in the back room on her fourth night. Small towns love someone to look down on, makes them feel better about their own miserable lives. I haven't done anything wrong. Doesn't matter. You're an outsider who got abandoned. That's scandal enough. He handed her a bottle of whiskey. Here, put some of this on those hands before they get infected. Clara dabbed the whiskey on her cracked knuckles and tried not to wince. The man who sent me here. Rhett. Who is he? Dutch's expression shifted, became more guarded. Rancher. Runs Red Mesa, about 15 miles west of town. Is he decent? By frontier standards, yeah. Pays his debts. Doesn't cheat at cards. Hasn't killed anyone who didn't deserve it. Clara blinked. Hasn't killed anyone who... This is Wyoming territory, girl. Different rules out here. Dutch corked the whiskey bottle. Rhett's got a reputation. People call him the Iron Wolf. Means he's hard, doesn't bend, doesn't back down. Also means he's got enemies. But he's fair, which is more than most men can say. Why did he help me? Dutch shrugged. Maybe he felt sorry for you. Maybe he just hates seeing people freeze to death. Hell if I know. Rhett doesn't explain himself to anyone. That night, lying on her cot in the back room, Clara tried to picture the rest of her life. 20 cents a day. Washing dishes in a saloon, sleeping in a room that smelled like beer and rats. Watching the townspeople cross the street to avoid her until she was too old or too broken to care anymore. Marcus Pemberton had promised her a life of comfort, a home, respectability. Instead, she got this. Clara pressed her face into the thin pillow and didn't let herself cry. Crying wouldn't change anything. Crying wouldn't bring Marcus back. Crying wouldn't make the town forgive her for the crime of being abandoned. All she could do was survive. One day at a time. But Rhett came back to the saloon 2 weeks after Clara started working there. She was behind the bar, polishing glasses with a rag that had seen better days, when she heard Dutch's voice boom across the room. "Iron Wolf! Thought you were dead!" Clara looked up and saw him. Same long coat, same hard face, but in the lamplight she could see him more clearly now. Maybe 30 years old. Scar across his left eyebrow, jaw that looked like it had been broken and healed wrong at least once. Not handsome, exactly, but there was something about him, something solid and unshakable, that made you keep looking. He spotted Clara immediately, nodded once. She nodded back. Dutch poured him whiskey without asking. "What brings you to town?" "Supplies. And I need to hire someone." "What kind of someone?" "Cook. Someone who can handle a kitchen for 20 men and won't fall apart when things get rough." Dutch laughed. "Good luck. Most women out here can barely boil water without burning down the house." Rhett took a drink, his eyes drifting back to Clara. "What about her?" Clara's heart jumped. "What about me?" "You know how to cook?" Yes, I was trained in a boarding school. We learned, Can you cook for a crew?" "Big meals, 3 times a day, no complaints." "I can try." "Trying's not good enough." Something hot flared in Clara's chest. "Then ask someone else." Rhett raised an eyebrow. Dutch coughed into his drink. "You got fire," Rhett said slowly. "That's good. You'll need it." He set down his glass. "Here's the offer. You come work at Red Mesa Ranch, cook for my men, keep the kitchen running. In exchange, you get a cabin, 3 meals a day, and $40 a month." Clara nearly dropped the glass she was holding. $40 was a fortune compared to what Dutch was paying her. "What's the catch?" she asked. "Catch is you're 15 miles from town in the middle of nowhere. Nearest neighbor is 3 hours by horse. Winter's just getting started, so you'll be snowed in for months. The work's hard, the men are rough, and if you can't handle it, there's no easy way out." "And if I can handle it?" Rhett's pale eyes held hers. "Then you'll have earned a place out here. That's worth more than money." Clara thought about the back room at the saloon, the way the townspeople looked at her, the 17 cents she had left to her name. "When do I start?" she said. They left before dawn the next morning. Clara packed her carpet bag, thanked Dutch for giving her a chance, and climbed into the wagon next to Rhett Callahan without letting herself think too hard about what she was doing. The man was basically a stranger. She was about to ride 15 miles into the wilderness with him and spend the winter on his ranch. It was possibly the most reckless thing she'd ever done. Rhett drove in silence for the first hour, the wagon rattling over frozen ground, the landscape stretching out empty and white in every direction. Clara kept her hands tucked under her arms for warmth and tried not to shiver. "You ever been on a ranch before?" Rhett finally asked. "No." "Ever cooked for more than a few people at once?" "No." "Ever lived outside a city?" "No." He grunted. "This is going to be interesting." "I'm not useless," Clara said sharply. "I can learn. Didn't say you couldn't, but learning's going to hurt." The sun was coming up now, turning the frozen plains gold and white. In the distance, Clara could see mountains jagged and dark against the sky. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, like the land was daring you to try surviving it. "Why did you offer me this job?" Clara asked. Rhett kept his eyes on the road. "Needed a cook. There are other women in Black Hollow. None who'd take it." "Why not?" He glanced at her sideways. "Because they're smart enough to be scared." "Should I be scared?" "Probably." Clara pulled her coat tighter. "Well, too late now." Something flickered across Rhett's face. Might have been respect, might have been amusement. Hard to tell. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Too late now." Eek. Red Mesa Ranch appeared on the horizon around midday. It wasn't what Clara expected. Not a neat homestead with painted fences and flower gardens. It was raw and functional, a sprawling collection of log buildings scattered across a shallow valley. The main house, the bunkhouse, the barn, corrals full of horses, cattle grazing in distant fields. Everything built to withstand the brutal winters and the endless work of keeping livestock alive. Men stopped what they were doing as the wagon rolled in. Clara felt their eyes on her, assessing, judging. She kept her chin up and her hands steady. Rhett pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house. "This is it." Clara climbed down, her legs stiff from the cold ride. Up close, the ranch felt even more isolated. No other buildings visible anywhere, just open land and sky and the wind that never stopped. A man approached from the barn, older, maybe 50, with a gray beard and a suspicious expression. "Who's this?" "New cook," Rhett said. "Clara Whitmore. She'll be taking over the kitchen." The man looked Clara up and down. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" "Boss, she's standing right here," Clara said coolly. "And she can hear you." The man's eyebrows shot up. He looked at Rhett. Rhett's expression didn't change. "Clara, this is Hank Bellamy. He's my foreman. Hank, Miss Whitmore is going to need help getting settled. Show her the kitchen. Make sure she's got what she needs." Hank's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to swallow. "Fine. But when this goes sideways, I'm reminding you I said it was a bad idea." "Noted," Rhett said, and walked away toward the barn. Hank turned to Clara. "Come on then. Let's see what kind of disaster we're dealing with." The kitchen was attached to the main house. A large room with a massive cast-iron stove, rough wooden counters, shelves stocked with supplies, and a table big enough to seat a dozen men. It smelled like wood smoke and old grease. "Breakfast is at 5, Hank said flatly. "Lunch at noon, dinner at 6. You miss a meal, the men don't eat, and they get mean when they're hungry. Supplies are in the pantry. You need something, ask me. Don't bother the boss unless it's an emergency." Clara set down her bag. "Anything else?" "Yeah, don't expect them to go easy on you just because you're a woman. These men work hard, they talk rough, and they don't have patience for city manners. You want respect, you'll have to earn it." "Fine," Clara said. "Tell them dinner will be ready at 6. Hank stared at her. "You serious? You said 6 o'clock. I'll have food ready. You don't even know what we've got. Then leave me alone so I can figure it out." For a moment, Hank looked like he wanted to argue. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, but maybe the beginning of it. "Your funeral," he muttered, and left. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding, and realized she'd just committed to cooking dinner for 20 men in less than 6 hours using supplies she hadn't inventoried in a kitchen she'd never worked in. She took a deep breath, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Womp. The pantry was better stocked than she expected. Flour, salt, dried beans, bacon, potatoes, onions, canned tomatoes. Enough to work with. Clara's training at the boarding school had been rigid. Precise measurements, proper techniques, meals that looked as good as they tasted. This would be different, rougher. But she understood the basics. Feed them well. Feed them a lot. Don't let them go hungry. She started with bread dough, flour, water, salt, lard. Her hands remembered the rhythm of kneading even though they were still cracked from washing dishes. While the dough rose, she built up the fire in the stove, got water heating, started cutting bacon into chunks. The work steadied her. This was something she knew how to do. By 5:30, the kitchen smelled like baking bread and frying bacon. Clara had made a massive pot of beans cooked with onions and molasses, roasted potatoes with rosemary, and biscuits that came out of the oven golden and steaming. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid food, the kind that would stick to a man's ribs after a day of hard work. At 6 o'clock exactly, Hank opened the kitchen door, stopped, stared. "What's all this?" "Dinner," Clara said. "Tell the men to wash up." 20 minutes later, the kitchen was full of ranch hands crowding around the table, filling plates, arguing over who got the last biscuit. Clara stood by the stove, watching them eat, her stomach tied in knots. One of the younger men, maybe 20, with red hair and freckles, took a bite of the beans and made a sound like he'd been punched. "Holy hell, these are good!" Another man grunted agreement through a mouthful of potato. "Better than Slim's cooking, that's for sure." "Slim couldn't cook worth a damn," someone else added. "Remember that stew he made? I thought it was going to kill us." They kept eating, kept talking, kept going back for seconds. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Hank caught her eye from across the room, gave her a single nod. It wasn't praise, wasn't even close to acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. She'd survived her first day. The next morning, Clara woke in her cabin to absolute darkness and cold so deep it felt like drowning. She fumbled for the lantern, got it lit, checked the small pocket watch she'd kept from her old life. 4:30 in the morning. Breakfast in half an hour. Her body screamed at her to stay in bed. Every muscle ached from yesterday's work. But she forced herself up, dressed in layers, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and walked through the frozen dark to the kitchen. The stove was cold. She built the fire back up, got water boiling for coffee, started frying bacon and eggs. By 5 o'clock, the kitchen was warm and the smell of breakfast was drifting across the ranch. The men came in slowly, still half asleep, not talking much. Clara served them plates of food and stood back while they ate. This became her routine. Wake before dawn, cook breakfast, clean up, start preparing lunch, cook lunch, clean up, start preparing dinner, cook dinner, clean up, collapse into bed and do it all again the next day. It was brutal, exhausting, the kind of work that ground you down hour by hour. But it was also the first time in weeks that Clara felt like she had a purpose. Yuck. The ranch hands started warming up to her by the end of the first week. Not all of them. Some still looked at her like she was a curiosity, a city girl playing dress-up who'd break as soon as things got hard. But others started lingering after meals to talk, asking questions about where she came from, why she'd come west. Clara kept her answers short. Didn't mention Marcus Pemberton. Didn't talk about being abandoned. Just said she'd needed a fresh start, and the frontier seemed like the place to find one. The red-haired kid, his name was Tommy, appointed himself her unofficial helper. He started showing up early to carry water, chop wood for the stove, haul supplies from the pantry. "You don't have to do this," Clara told him one morning. "I know," Tommy said cheerfully, "but Hank said if I want to keep eating your biscuits, I better make myself useful." Clara smiled despite herself. "Well, I wouldn't want to deprive you of biscuits." Tommy grinned. "Damn right." The work got a little easier after that. Still hard, still exhausting, but easier. Rhett Callahan, meanwhile, was a ghost. Clara barely saw him. He was always out working, mending fences, checking cattle, riding the property lines. He took his meals at odd hours, usually after everyone else had eaten, and he never stayed long. Just filled a plate, ate standing up, and disappeared again. But Clara noticed things about him. The way he moved, careful, deliberate, like someone used to violence. The way the men respected him, not out of fear, but because he worked harder than any of them. The way his eyes tracked everything, constantly assessing, never quite at rest. One night, about 3 weeks after Clara arrived, she was cleaning up after dinner when Rhett came in late. He looked exhausted, coat covered in snow, face wind-burned, shoulders tight with tension. "There's stew left," Clara said, "and bread." "Thanks." He served himself and sat down at the table, eating mechanically. Clara kept washing dishes, trying not to stare. "You settling in?" Rhett asked suddenly. "I think so." "Men giving you trouble?" "No more than I can handle." He nodded slowly. "Good, because it's going to get harder." Clara turned to face him. "What do you mean?" Rhett set down his spoon. "Weather's turning. We're about to get hit with a real storm, the kind that snows you in for days. Once that happens, nobody's leaving the ranch until it clears. You'll be stuck here with 20 men going stir-crazy from cabin fever." "I'll manage." "You say that now." "I mean it." Rhett studied her for a long moment. "You're stubborn. That's good. But stubborn only gets you so far out here." "Then what else do I need?" "Luck," he said quietly. "A hell of a lot of luck." The storm hit 2 days later, and it was worse than anything Clara had imagined. The wind came first, howling across the valley like something alive and angry. Then the snow, thick and blinding, turning the world into a white void. Within hours, the ranch was completely cut off. No way in, no way out. Clara had never felt so trapped in her life. The men crowded into the bunkhouse and the main house, restless and bored. Tensions started rising on the second day. Arguments over card games, fights over stupid things. Tommy got into a shoving match with another ranch hand over a missing knife, and Hank had to separate them before it turned into something worse. "This is normal," Tommy explained to Clara later. "Happens every winter. Men get cooped up, they get mean. Usually someone ends up with a black eye before the storm clears." "That's insane. That's the frontier." Clara kept cooking, kept serving meals, kept the kitchen warm and the coffee hot. It was the only thing holding the place together. On the fourth night of the storm, one of the older ranch hands, a man named Pike, who'd been drinking since breakfast, cornered Clara in the pantry. You know what we need? He slurred, standing too close. Little entertainment. Been a long winter already. Clara's heart kicked into overdrive. Step back. Come on, sweetheart, don't be like that. I said step back. Pike reached for her arm. Clara grabbed the nearest thing, a cast iron skillet, and swung it hard. The sound of metal hitting skull echoed through the kitchen. Pike went down like a dropped stone. For a moment, Clara just stood there, skillet still raised, breathing hard. Then the kitchen door slammed open and Rhett was there, taking in the scene in one glance. He looked at Pike, looked at Clara, looked at the skillet. "You all right?" Rhett asked calmly. "I think so." Rhett nudged Pike with his boot. The man groaned but didn't get up. "Yeah, he'll live." He turned to Clara. "You hurt?" "No." "Good." Rhett grabbed Pike by the collar and started dragging him toward the door. "I'll handle this." "Wait," Clara said. Is he going to, will there be, he's going to wake up tomorrow with a headache and an apology to make," Rhett said. "After that, if he comes near you again, I'll break his arm. Understand?" Clara nodded mutely. Rhett hauled Pike outside, leaving Clara alone in the kitchen, with her heart still racing and the skillet still in her hand. She set it down carefully, went back to washing dishes, and tried to pretend her hands weren't shaking. The next morning, Pike appeared in the kitchen doorway looking miserable. "Miss Whitmore, I wanted to apologize for last night. I was drunk and stupid, and I had no right to—" "You're forgiven," Clara interrupted, "but it doesn't happen again." "No, ma'am, it won't." He left quickly. Clara went back to cooking breakfast. Hank appeared a few minutes later. "Heard you knocked Pike on his ass." "He'll recover." "That's not what I meant." Hank leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I meant that's the third week you've been here, and you just earned more respect than most men get in a year. The boys are scared of you now." "Good," Clara said flatly. Hank laughed, actually laughed. "Yeah, you'll do fine here." The storm finally broke on the 6th day. The sky cleared, the sun came out, and the ranch started digging itself out from under 3 feet of snow. Clara stood outside her cabin that evening, wrapped in her shawl, watching the sunset turn the snow gold and pink. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but she didn't go inside. She thought about Marcus Pemberton, about the life he'd promised her. The comfortable house, the easy days. That life would have been a cage. This life was hard and brutal and exhausting. But it was hers. She'd earned it. Nobody had given it to her. Nobody could take it away. Clara smiled into the frozen air and went back inside to start preparing dinner. January bled into February. The work continued, the cold continued. Clara's hands healed slowly, turning rough and capable. She learned which men liked their coffee strong, which ones had sweet teeth, which ones would eat anything as long as there was enough of it. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, how to time meals so the men came in hungry but not starving, how to stretch supplies when deliveries were late, how to read the weather by watching Rhett's face. She learned that Tommy was the youngest of 8 children and desperately homesick, that Hank had lost his wife to cholera 10 years ago and never remarried, that Pike had fought in the war and still had nightmares about it. She learned that Rhett Callahan got up earlier than anyone, worked later than everyone, and carried the weight of the entire ranch on his shoulders without complaint. And slowly, carefully, she started to understand why they called him the Iron Wolf. But it was mid-February when Clara found Rhett in the barn one night, long after everyone else had gone to bed. She'd forgotten to grab firewood earlier and needed more to get through the night. The barn was the closest source. She pushed open the heavy door, expecting it to be empty. Instead, she found Rhett sitting on a hay bale, reading by lantern light. He looked up when she entered. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Sorry, Clara said. "I needed wood. I didn't know anyone was here." "It's fine." Rhett closed the book, an old volume with a cracked leather cover. "Wood's in the back." Clara should have just grabbed what she needed and left, but curiosity got the better of her. "What are you reading?" Rhett hesitated, then, almost reluctantly, "Tennyson." "Poetry?" "Yeah." Clara couldn't help it. She smiled. "The Iron Wolf reads poetry. Don't spread that around." "Why not?" "Because it's not exactly intimidating." Clara walked closer, looking at the book. I used to teach poetry, back in Philadelphia, to girls who thought it was boring and useless. Was it? No, it was the only thing that made sense sometimes. Rhett's expression softened slightly. Yeah, I know what you mean. They stood there in the quiet barn, lamplight flickering between them, and Clara realized this was the longest conversation she'd ever had with him. Most of their exchanges had been functional, about meals, supplies, ranch business, nothing personal. Why did you really hire me? Clara asked. Rhett looked at her steadily. Told you. Needed a cook. You could have found someone else. Could have, didn't want to. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, then, because you were standing on that platform in Black Hollow, looking like the world had just ended, and you still had your chin up, still had fight in you. I figured anyone with that much spine could handle Red Mesa. Clara's throat tightened. You didn't know anything about me. Knew enough. I could have been useless. But you're not. I could have run the first time things got hard. But you didn't. They looked at each other across the lantern light, and Clara felt something shift between them, something she didn't have words for yet. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me a chance. Rhett nodded once. You earned it. Clara grabbed her firewood and left, but she thought about that conversation for days afterward. Thought about the way Rhett had looked at her, the way his voice had changed when he talked about her spine, the fact that he read poetry in a barn at midnight because it was the only place he could be alone. She thought about it and tried not to think about it, and failed completely. March came with warmer winds and the first signs that winter might actually end someday. The snow started melting. The cattle were moved to new pastures. The men started talking about spring work, branding, fence repairs, preparations for the cattle drive that would happen in early summer. Clara's routine had become second nature now. She could navigate the kitchen in the dark, knew exactly how much food to prepare, could handle any disaster that came up without panicking. She'd also started helping with other things around the ranch, mending clothes, treating minor injuries, keeping inventory of supplies. Nobody had asked her to do these things. She just saw what needed doing and did it. You're making the rest of us look bad, Tommy teased one afternoon while she was sewing a button back onto his shirt. Then work harder, Clara shot back. Yes, ma'am. Hank started asking her opinion on supply orders. Pike brought her wildflowers once, awkward and apologetic, still trying to make up for that night in the pantry. Even the ranch hands who'd been skeptical at first now treated her with something like respect. Clara had become part of Red Mesa Ranch, and she was starting to understand what Rhett had meant about earning a place. The first time she heard about Rhett's reputation, though, really heard about it, was from Tommy. They were in the kitchen, Clara making bread while Tommy chopped vegetables, when he suddenly said, You know the boss killed a man last year, right? Clara's hand stilled in the dough. What? Yeah, 3 men tried to steal cattle from the south pasture. Boss tracked them for 2 days, caught up with them, and Tommy made a gesture. 2 of them got smart and ran. The third one decided to fight. And Rhett killed him. In self-defense, but yeah. Tommy went back to chopping. That's why they call him the Iron Wolf. He doesn't back down. Ever. Clara processed this information slowly. Has he killed other men? Don't know. Don't ask. But I know he's got enemies. Men who remember things he did during the range wars. Men who want revenge for things that happened before I got here. Tommy glanced at her. That scare you? Should it? Maybe. Boss is a good man, but he's dangerous, always has been. Clara thought about Rhett sitting in the barn reading Tennyson, about the careful way he treated his men, about the quiet loneliness she'd glimpsed in him. I'm not scared, she said. Tommy grinned. Yeah, I didn't think you would be. But that night, lying in her cabin, Clara thought about danger, about violence, about the kind of life Rhett Callahan must have lived to earn a reputation like the Iron Wolf. And she thought about the fact that she didn't care. Whatever he'd done, whatever he'd been, he'd given her a chance when no one else would. That mattered more than reputation. Why? April arrived with rain and mud and the relentless work of spring. The ranch came alive again. Cattle were branded, fences were repaired, new horses were broken. Everyone worked from dawn until dark, exhausted but energized by the changing season. Clara found herself spending more time outside, helping where she could. She learned to recognize each horse by name, started understanding the complex system of managing a ranch this size, watched Rhett work with the animals, patient, firm, never cruel, and realized he was a better man than he gave himself credit for. They started talking more. Nothing deep, just conversations while she brought him coffee in the fields, or when he came in late for dinner. Small moments that started adding up. One evening, Rhett found her sitting on the porch of her cabin, watching the sunset. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "It's your ranch." That's not an answer. Then no, I don't mind. He sat down, not too close, but not distant either. They watched the sky turn red and gold together. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Rhett asked. Clara considered. "Sometimes, but not as much as I thought I would." "Why not?" "Because I'm more myself here. Back there, I was always trying to be what people expected, quiet, proper, grateful for whatever scraps of life men like Marcus Pemberton decided to give me." She glanced at him. "Out here, I can just be angry and stubborn and difficult, and nobody punishes me for it." Rhett smiled. Actually smiled. "You're not difficult." "Liar." "All right, you're difficult, but in a good way." "There's a good way to be difficult?" "Yeah, it means you don't let people push you around." They fell quiet again. Clara was intensely aware of how close he was, how easy it would be to lean over, close that distance, see what would happen. Instead, she stayed perfectly still. "I'm glad you're here," Rhett said quietly. Clara's heart did something complicated. "Me too." He looked at her then, really looked at her, like he was trying to memorize her face, and Clara knew that whatever was building between them was more than just gratitude or friendship or proximity, knew that it was dangerous and complicated and probably a terrible idea, knew that she didn't care. But before she could say anything, Rhett stood up. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." And he walked away, leaving Clara sitting alone on the porch, with her heart racing and her head spinning, and absolutely no idea what to do about any of it. Cuts. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in late April. One of the ranch hands had gone into town for supplies and came back with mail. Most of it was for Rhett. Bills, correspondence from other ranchers, nothing unusual. But there was one envelope addressed to Clara Whitmore. She took it with shaking hands. The handwriting was Marcus Pemberton's. Clara walked to her cabin, locked the door, and stood there for a full 5 minutes before she could bring herself to open it. "Dear Clara, I hope this letter finds you well. I've learned through mutual acquaintances that you're working at Red Mesa Ranch. I'm writing to apologize for my actions in December. I behaved dishonorably, and you deserved better. The truth is, I was never in a position to marry you. I'm already married, have been for 8 years, and my wife had no knowledge of our correspondence. When we arrived in Black Hollow together, I panicked. I made a cowardly choice, and for that I am deeply sorry. I'm not writing to ask your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing to tell you that I've arranged for funds to be made available to you at the Black Hollow Bank. $500. It's not enough to make up for what I did, but perhaps it will help you start fresh wherever you choose to go. I wish you well." Marcus Clara read the letter 3 times. Then she walked outside, borrowed Tommy's matches, and burned it. She watched the paper curl and blacken, Marcus Pemberton's apology turning to ash, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. He thought $500 could fix what he'd done, thought money could erase the months of terror and humiliation and desperation he'd caused. He was wrong. Clara didn't need his money, didn't need his apology, didn't need anything from him ever again. She'd built a life without him, and she was done looking back. That night at dinner, Clara was quieter than usual. Rhett noticed, of course he noticed, and lingered after the other men left. "You all right?" "Fine." "You're lying." Clara turned to face him. "I got a letter today. From the man who left me in Black Hollow." Rhett's expression went cold. "What did it say?" "That he's sorry. That he's married and was never going to marry me. That he's sending money to make up for it." She laughed bitterly. "Like $500 erases everything." "You want me to find him?" Clara blinked. "What?" "You want me to find him?" Rhett repeated, his voice deadly calm. "Because I will. I'll track him down and make sure he understands exactly what kind of pain he caused." "Rhett, I'm serious." I know you are. Clara stepped closer. But I don't want that. I don't want revenge. I don't want his money. I don't want anything from him. He's already taken enough of my life. Rhett searched her face. Then what do you want? I want to stay here, Clara said. I want to keep cooking for you and your men. I want to keep learning this place. I want... She hesitated. I want this to be enough. Clara, is it? She asked. Is this enough? The question hung between them, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Rhett reached out slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she'd disappear. His calloused fingers brushed her cheek. You're more than enough, he said roughly. You've been more than enough since the day you stepped off that train. Claire's breath caught. Then Rhett pulled back, breaking the moment. But you should know something. I'm not an easy man. I've got enemies. I've done things I'm not proud of. People have died because of choices I made. If you stay here, if we... He stopped, started again. You deserve better than me. That's not your choice to make, Clara said. Maybe not, but you should have all the information before you decide. Then tell me. Rhett ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. There's a gang, 3 brothers. They blame me for their cousin's death last year, the cattle thief I killed. They've been making threats, burning homesteads, attacking smaller ranches, and they're getting closer. Clara's stomach dropped. When? Don't know. Could be weeks, could be months, but they're coming. Rhett met her eyes. I'm going to have to deal with them eventually, and when I do, people might get hurt. You're trying to scare me away. I'm trying to be honest with you. Then be honest about this, Clara said. Do you want me to leave? No, Rhett said immediately, fiercely. But then I'm staying. Clara, I'm staying, she repeated. I've survived being abandoned, freezing half to death, washing dishes in a saloon, learning to cook for 20 men, a blizzard, Pike's stupidity, and 4 months of frontier life. I can survive whatever's coming. Rhett looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile, not the careful ones he usually wore. Yeah, he said quietly. I believe you can. He left soon after, but Clara stood in the kitchen for a long time, her heart still racing, thinking about the way he'd touched her face. The way he'd said she was more than enough. The way everything had just changed. Well, the next few weeks were strange. Clara and Rhett circled each other like they were trying to figure out new rules for something that didn't have rules yet. They talked more, stood closer, let conversations stretch longer than necessary. The men noticed, of course. Tommy gave Clara knowing looks. Hank made comments about the boss being in a better mood than usual. Even Pike grinned at her once and said, Never seen him smile this much. Clara didn't know what to do with any of it. She thought Marcus Pemberton was love. Thought the polished letters and empty promises meant something real. But that had been a fantasy, a lie wrapped in pretty words. This thing with Rhett was different, rougher. No poetry or false promises. Just 2 people trying to survive the frontier and finding each other in the process. It was messy and complicated and probably doomed, but it felt real. May arrived with warmer weather and a message from town. Rhett rode back from Black Hollow one evening looking grim. He found Clara in the kitchen and said, The brothers are moving, burned a homestead 20 miles south yesterday. Clara's hand stilled on the knife she was holding. How many people? Family got out alive. Barely. And the brothers? 3 of them, armed, dangerous, headed this way. Clara set down the knife. What do we do? I'm riding out to check the property lines, make sure they haven't gotten closer. I'll be gone a few days. Rhett's jaw was tight. Hank's in charge while I'm gone. If anything happens, anything, you listen to him, understand? I understand. Clara. Rhett caught her arm gently. I need you to promise me something. What? If they come while I'm gone, you don't try to be a hero. You hide. You let the men handle it. You stay alive. Clara looked at him, at the fear buried beneath his careful control, at the man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. All right, she said. I promise. Rhett nodded, looked like he wanted to say more. Instead, he just squeezed her arm once and left. Clara watched him go, a cold feeling settling in her gut. Something bad was coming. She could feel it. Rhett rode out the next morning with 3 men. The ranch felt emptier without him, quieter, like everyone was holding their breath. Clara went through her routine, cooking, cleaning, keeping things running, but she kept glancing at the horizon, waiting for riders who might or might not come. 2 days passed. Nothing. On the 3rd day, Tommy came running into the kitchen, his face pale. "They're here, the brothers. They just rode up to the front gate." Clara's heart stopped. "Where's Hank?" "Already out there." Clara dropped what she was doing and ran outside. 3 men sat on horses at the gate, and even from a distance, Clara could see the violence in them. They looked hungry, dangerous, like men who'd passed beyond caring about consequences. Hank stood in front of them, blocking the path to the ranch house. His hand rested on his gun. "You got no business here," Hank was saying. The middle brother, the largest one, grinned. "We got business with Callahan." "Where is he?" "Not here." "Then we'll wait." "No, you won't." The brother's grin faded. "Old man, you're making a mistake." "Only mistake being made is you boys not riding away while you still can." For a moment, Clara thought they might actually leave. Thought Hank's steel might be enough to send them packing. Then the brother on the left pulled his gun and fired. Hank went down. Everything after that happened in pieces. Fragments. Clara screaming. Men running from the bunkhouse. More gunshots. One of the brothers throwing something, a bottle with a rag stuffed in it, already burning. The barn exploded into flames. Clara ran forward, not thinking, just moving. She dropped to her knees beside Hank. Blood everywhere. So much blood. "Get inside," Hank gasped. "Get everyone inside." "I'm not leaving you." "Do it!" Tommy grabbed Clara's arm and hauled her up. They ran for the house, bullets kicking up dirt around them. Other ranch hands were scrambling for cover. Chaos. Fire. Shouting. They made it inside, slammed the door, barricaded it with furniture. And through the window, Clara watched Red Mesa Ranch start to burn. The first bullet had shattered the front window. Glass everywhere, glittering on the floor like broken stars. Clara crouched behind the overturned table they'd dragged in front of the door, her heart slamming against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. Outside, the barn was a tower of flame. Smoke rolled across the yard in thick black waves. She could hear the horses screaming, that awful sound animals make when they're trapped and terrified, and men shouting, though whether they were Rhett's men or the brothers, she couldn't tell anymore. Tommy was pressed against the wall beside the window, rifle in his hands, his freckled face gone white. "I count at least 5 of them now. They must have brought reinforcements." "5?" Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "You said there were 3 brothers." "There were. The other 2 must be hired guns." Tommy risked a glance through the broken window and jerked back as another shot rang out. "They're spreading out, trying to surround the house." Pike appeared from the back hallway, bleeding from a cut above his eye. "Kitchen's secure, but they're going to try the back door eventually." "How's Hank?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer from Pike's expression. "Dead. Bled out before we could get him inside." Pike's voice was flat, empty. "He was trying to tell us something at the end, kept saying hold them over and over." Clara closed her eyes. Hank Bellamy, who'd been suspicious of her at first but had grown to respect her, who'd lost his wife and never remarried, who'd run this ranch like it was his own because Rhett trusted him completely. Gone. "How many of us are left?" she asked. Tommy did the count silently, his lips moving. 12 inside the house. Maybe 3 more in the bunkhouse if they're still alive. Hank's dead. Wilson took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll live. Everyone else is either here or pinned down somewhere. 12 men. Against 5 armed attackers who'd already proven they were willing to kill. The odds weren't good. Another window shattered, this one in what used to be the sitting room. Clara heard someone curse, then return fire. The smell of gunpowder was overwhelming now, mixing with smoke from the burning barn. "We can't just sit here," Pike said. "They'll burn us out eventually." "Boss said to hold the house," Tommy argued. "He's coming back. He has to. He doesn't even know we're under attack. By the time he figures it out and rides back, we'll all be dead." They were both right. Clara knew it. If they stayed, they'd get picked off one by one or burned alive. If they tried to run, they'd be gunned down in the yard. There was no good choice, only bad ones and worse ones. Clara stood up. Both men stared at her. "What are you doing?" Tommy hissed. Getting a better look. She moved to the window, staying low, and peered out through the gap in the curtains. The ranch yard was chaos, bodies on the ground. She couldn't tell if they were dead or just taking cover. The barn fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the darkening sky. And there, moving between buildings with rifles ready, she could see them. The attackers. Methodical. Patient. They weren't in a hurry because they knew time was on their side. One of them, the big brother who'd shot Hank, was giving orders. Pointing, directing his men to flank the house from multiple sides. They're coordinating, Clara said. That one's their leader. Pike came up beside her. The middle brother, name's Cade Brennan, meanest of the three. Story goes he once beat a man to death with his bare hands over a card game. Lovely. Clara watched Cade gesture toward the bunkhouse. Two of his men started moving in that direction. They're going after whoever's still out there. We should help them, Tommy said desperately. We can't. We step outside, we're dead. Clara's mind was racing. 12 men inside, 5 outside. The house was defensible, but not forever. They needed to buy time, needed Rhett to come back, needed... The root cellar, she said suddenly. Both men looked at her. The root cellar, Clara repeated. It's accessed from inside the house, but the exit tunnel comes up near the tree line, right? That's what Tommy told me when he was showing me around. Tommy nodded slowly. Yeah, emergency exit in case of fire or raiders, but it's narrow. Maybe 2 people could fit through at a time. So we send someone through, someone fast, someone who can ride to find Rhett and bring him back. Pike was already shaking his head. That's suicide. They'll see whoever comes out that tunnel and shoot them before they get 10 feet. Not if we create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Clara looked at the burning barn, then at the rifles stacked by the door. The kind that makes them think we're stupider than we are. She explained quickly. It wasn't a good plan. Wasn't even close to a good plan. But it was better than waiting to die. Tommy would go through the tunnel, make for the horses they kept in the far pasture, and ride like hell to find Rhett. Meanwhile, everyone else would concentrate fire on one side of the house, making the attackers think they were mounting a defense there. With luck, Tommy would be gone before anyone noticed. That's insane, Pike said. You got a better idea? He didn't. Tommy looked terrified but determined. I can do it. I know the land better than anyone except the boss. If I can get to a horse, I can find him. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Clara grabbed his arm. Tommy, if this doesn't work, then I die trying. Which is better than dying here doing nothing. He tried to smile. Didn't quite make it. Besides, your biscuits are worth risking my neck for. Despite everything, Clara almost laughed. Pike clasped Tommy's shoulder. You get through this, kid. First round's on me. I'll hold you to that. They moved fast. Clara gathered every man who could still shoot and positioned them along the front windows. Explained the plan in quick, quiet words. Some of them looked skeptical. Others just looked scared. But they all nodded. Wilson, who'd been shot in the shoulder, volunteered to lead the distraction fire even though he could barely hold his rifle. Might as well make myself useful before I bleed out. You're not going to bleed out, Clara told him firmly, though she had no idea if that was true. Tommy headed for the cellar entrance in the kitchen. Clara followed him, watching as he pulled up the heavy trapdoor. The ladder descended into darkness. Clara, Tommy said quietly, if I don't make it back, go on. You're making it back. But if I don't, tell the boss. He stopped, swallowed hard. Tell him we held the line. Tell him we tried. Tell him yourself. Tommy nodded. Then he disappeared down into the dark. Clara waited 30 seconds. Then she returned to the front room and said, Now. The men opened fire. It was deafening. Every rifle in the house going off at once, concentrated on the western approach where Cade and his men had been moving. The noise was enormous, the muzzle flashes bright in the growing darkness. Clara couldn't tell if they were hitting anything, but that wasn't the point. The point was noise, chaos, making the attackers think they were under serious assault from that direction. Outside, she heard shouts. Return fire! The sound of men scrambling for better cover. Clara counted in her head. 1 minute, 2, 3. Somewhere beneath the house, Tommy was crawling through the tunnel, emerging somewhere near the tree line, running for the distant pasture. 4 minutes, 5. Cease fire, Clara yelled. The shooting stopped. In the sudden quiet, Clara's ears rang. She moved back to the window, trying to see through the smoke and darkness. There, movement near the pasture, too distant to make out clearly, but a horse and rider burst from the trees, galloping east at full speed. He made it, Pike breathed. One of Cade's men spotted Tommy and raised his rifle, but the distance was too great. The shot went wide. Tommy disappeared over a rise, still riding hard. Clara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Now they just had to survive long enough for him to reach Rhett. The attack resumed almost immediately. Cade Brennan had clearly realized what they'd done, and he was furious about it. The gunfire intensified, concentrated, and vicious. They weren't trying to flush anyone out anymore. They were trying to kill. "Back room," someone shouted. "They're coming through the back." Clara ran toward the kitchen just as the back door splintered inward. Two men burst through, guns raised. Pike was faster, shot the first one in the chest. The man went down hard. The second one fired wildly, the bullet punching through cabinets, and then Wilson was there despite his wounded shoulder, tackling the attacker to the ground. The fight was brutal and close. Fists and gun butts and desperate violence. Clara grabbed a pan, the same one she'd hit Pike with months ago, and brought it down on the attacker's head. He went limp. Wilson rolled away, breathing hard. "Thanks." "Don't mention it." They dragged furniture to block the shattered back door, but Clara knew it wouldn't hold long. The house was being breached. The defenses were failing. "Upstairs," Pike said. "We fall back to the second floor. Make them come up the stairs if they want us." It was a retreat, but it was the smart move. They'd have the high ground. A better defensive position. Clara helped drag the wounded men, Wilson and two others who'd been hit, up the narrow staircase. The rest followed, bringing weapons and ammunition. From the upstairs windows, Clara could see the full scope of the disaster. The barn was a blackened skeleton now, still burning but mostly collapsed. The bunkhouse had taken heavy fire. Bodies in the yard. She counted 3, all wearing the rough clothes of ranch hands. Men who'd worked for Rhett. Men who'd eaten her cooking and laughed at Tommy's jokes and survived the brutal winter only to die like this. "How long can we hold?" someone asked. No one answered because no one knew. The night wore on. Hours blurred together. The attackers kept up steady pressure, shooting out windows, trying the doors, setting small fires to test the defenders' resolve. Every time they pushed, Rhett's men pushed back. But ammunition was running low. People were getting tired, wounded. Clara moved between the men, bringing water, helping reload rifles, tying bandages with strips torn from her skirt. Her hands were steady, even though inside she was screaming. The cookhouse girl keeping a siege together through sheer stubborn will. Around midnight, Pike appeared at her side. "We're down to maybe 50 rounds total. When that's gone, we're fighting with knives and prayer." "Then we make every shot count." "Clara." He looked at her seriously. "When they come up those stairs, and they will eventually, I need you to hide. Find somewhere they won't look. Let us handle it. I'm not hiding while you all die. You're the only woman here. You know what they'll do if they catch you." Clara did know, had heard enough stories about what happened to women during frontier raids. But she'd also made a choice months ago when she'd decided to stay at Red Mesa Ranch, had decided she wasn't running anymore. "I'm not hiding," she repeated. Pike looked like he wanted to argue, but another volley of gunfire cut him off. They both ducked instinctively. When Clara looked up again, the eastern sky was starting to lighten. Dawn coming. They'd held through the night, but barely. The attack came just after sunrise. Cade Brennan, clearly done with patience, simply set fire to the ground floor. Clara smelled smoke before she saw flames, and by the time someone shouted a warning, the fire was already climbing the walls. "We have to go!" Pike yelled. "Now!" But go where? The stairs were blocked by fire. The windows were too high to jump without breaking legs. They were trapped. Clara looked around desperately. The men were panicking, some trying to beat back flames with blankets, others just frozen in terror. This was it. This was how they died. Not in a fight, but choking on smoke while the house burned around them. Then Wilson, wounded, barely standing, pointed at the window. "Rope. The spare climbing rope. We used it last month to fix the roof." They found it in a storage closet, and suddenly there was hope again. Thin, fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. They secured the rope to a beam, threw it out the window. One by one, men started sliding down. Clara helped, steadying the rope, counting heads. 8 men down. 9. 10. The smoke was getting thicker, making it hard to breathe, hard to see. Pike grabbed her arm. Your turn. After you. Clara. After you. He went. Then it was just Clara and Wilson. The fire was in the room now, spreading fast. The heat was incredible. Go, Wilson rasped, blood staining his shirt from his shoulder wound. Clara grabbed the rope, wrapped it around her hands, and went over the edge. The drop was terrifying. The rope burned her palms. She hit the ground hard, rolled, came up coughing and disoriented. Hands pulled her away from the building just as part of the roof collapsed inward with a roar of flame and timber. Wilson came down last. Barely made it before the rope caught fire. They scattered into the yard, taking cover behind anything they could find. The house, Rhett's house, the place where Clara had cooked breakfast every morning for months, was fully engulfed. Everything inside was burning, gone. And standing in the middle of the yard, watching his handiwork with satisfaction, was Cade Brennan. That's it, boys, he shouted to his men. They're out of holes to hide in. His crew emerged from cover, advancing across the open ground. 5 against 12, but the 12 were exhausted, low on ammunition, and trapped in the open. Not good odds. Clara looked around frantically for anything they could use. Her eyes landed on the collapsed barn, the pile of tools near what used to be the workshop, the scattered remains of ranch equipment. An idea formed. Desperate and dangerous, but possible. Pike, she hissed. The wagon. Can it still move? He followed her gaze. One of the supply wagons sat near the barn, partially damaged but mostly intact. Maybe. Why? Get it rolling. Aim it at them. Just do it! Pike ran, keeping low. 2 other men followed. They reached the wagon, pushed it free from debris. It was heavy, laden with supplies that hadn't been unloaded, but 3 grown men could move it. Barely. Cade's men were closing in, spread out across the yard, 20 feet away now, 15. Now! Clara screamed. Pike and the others shoved with everything they had. The wagon lurched forward, gained momentum, started rolling down the slight grade of the yard directly toward Cade's group. For a moment, the attackers just stared, confused. Then they scattered, diving out of the way. The wagon careened through the middle of their formation, breaking it apart. One man wasn't fast enough, got clipped by the wheel, and went down hard. In the chaos, Rhett's men opened fire with their remaining ammunition. 2 more attackers dropped. A third took a bullet in the leg and crawled for cover. Suddenly the numbers had shifted. 5 against 12 had become 2 against 12. Cade Brennan, realizing the situation had turned against him, made a run for the horses. His last remaining man covered his retreat, firing wildly. But before Cade could reach his horse, a new sound cut through the morning air. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders coming hard from the east. Clara's heart leapt. Please let it be. Rhett Callahan exploded into the ranch yard at full gallop, Tommy right behind him, along with the 3 men who'd gone with Rhett on patrol. They took in the scene instantly, the burning buildings, the bodies, the scattered defenders. Rhett's face was something Clara had never seen before. Pure rage. Cold and absolute. He didn't slow down, didn't hesitate, just rode straight at Cade Brennan like he intended to run him down. Cade spun, brought his rifle up, fired. The shot went wide. Rhett was off his horse before it even stopped moving, closing the distance in long strides. Cade tried to fire again, but the rifle was empty. He threw it aside, went for his pistol. Rhett hit him like a freight train. They went down together, rolling across the blood-stained dirt. Cade was big, but Rhett was bigger, stronger, and absolutely furious. His fist connected with Cade's jaw once, twice. The sound was sickening. Cade managed to throw Rhett off, scrambled to his feet, drew a knife. Rhett didn't even flinch, just moved forward, caught Cade's wrist, twisted hard. The knife fell. Then Rhett's hands were around Cade's throat. You came to my home, Rhett said, his voice barely human. You killed my men. You tried to burn them alive. Cade couldn't answer, could barely breathe. Clara wanted to look away. Couldn't. Boss! Pike's voice. Boss, we got him. He's done. Rhett didn't let go. His hands stayed locked around Cade's throat, squeezing tighter. Cade's face was turning purple. His struggles were getting weaker. "Rhett!" Clara ran forward, grabbed his arm. "Rhett, stop!" For a terrible moment she thought he wouldn't, thought she'd have to watch him kill a man with his bare hands. Then something in her voice must have gotten through because his grip loosened, just slightly, just enough. Cade collapsed, gasping and choking. Rhett stood up slowly. His knuckles were split open, bleeding. His clothes were covered in dirt and blood and soot. He looked at Clara, and his eyes were haunted. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." "The others?" "Wilson's shot. Hank's dead. 3 more dead in the yard. Everyone else is—" She gestured helplessly at the burning buildings. "Everyone else is alive." Rhett's jaw clenched. He turned to look at Red Mesa Ranch, or what was left of it. The house was gone. The barn was gone. Half the outbuildings were damaged or destroyed. The place he'd built over years of brutal work was in ruins, and he'd almost lost everyone. Tommy approached cautiously. "Boss, we got the last of them tied up. What do you want us to do?" Rhett looked at Cade Brennan, still gasping on the ground, at the bodies of his dead men, at the smoldering wreckage of his home. "Tie them to horses," he said flatly. "We're taking them to the territorial marshal. Let the law decide what happens to them." "The law?" Pike sounded surprised. "After what they did?" "After what they did, I want them to hang legal, not because I killed them in anger." Rhett's voice was hard as iron. "I want them to know they're dying because they murdered good men. Want everyone in the territory to know what happens when you attack Red Mesa." The remaining attackers were rounded up, tied, loaded onto horses. Cade Brennan could barely sit upright, his throat bruised and swollen. The wounded man with the bullet in his leg screamed when they lifted him. Clara watched it all with a strange numbness, like she was observing from a great distance. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Her burned palms throbbed. She was covered in dirt and blood, some of it hers, most of it not. They'd survived. Barely. But they'd survived. Rhett dispatched men to take the prisoners to town. Then he turned to survey his ranch. In the growing daylight, the damage looked even worse. The main house was a blackened shell. The barn was completely gone. Tools, supplies, equipment, all destroyed. The cattle had scattered during the fight. The horses were traumatized. Months of work, years of building, gone in one night. "We can rebuild," Pike said quietly. Rhett didn't answer. Clara walked over to him. They stood side by side, looking at the ruins. "I'm sorry," Clara said. "We tried to hold them off, tried to—" "You did hold them off," Rhett's voice was rough. "Against 5 armed men. You held them until I could get back. That's—" He stopped. Started again. "That's more than I had any right to expect. Hank died." "I know. If we'd been faster, smarter, if you'd been slower or dumber, you'd all be dead." Rhett turned to face her fully. "Clara, you saved my ranch, saved my men. Maybe not the buildings, but the people. That's what matters." Clara felt her throat get tight. "It doesn't feel like winning." "Winning never does." They stood there in silence, watching smoke curl up from the wreckage. The sun was fully up now, bright and indifferent. The day was going to be beautiful, Clara realized. Clear sky, warm, perfect weather for working cattle or mending fences or any of the 1,000 tasks that needed doing on a ranch. Instead, they'd spend it burying the dead. The next few days were a blur of grim necessity. They buried Hank Bellamy and the 3 other men who'd died in the fighting, dug graves in the rocky soil, marked them with wooden crosses. Clara stood at the graveside and tried to find words that meant something, but everything sounded hollow. "They died defending their home," Rhett said finally. "Defending each other. That's as good a death as any man can hope for." It wasn't comfort, exactly, but it was honest. They salvaged what they could from the ruins. Tools that had survived the fire. Supplies buried under rubble. The cattle were slowly rounded up from where they'd scattered. The horses were calmed and accounted for. The work was exhausting and depressing, but it kept everyone busy, kept them from thinking too hard about what had happened. Word spread fast. By the 3rd day, neighbors started arriving, ranchers from adjacent properties, townspeople from Black Hollow, even some homesteaders Clara had never met. They came with supplies, tools, offers of help, men willing to work, women bringing food. Heard what happened, one grizzled rancher said to Rhett. Came to help rebuild. Didn't ask for help. Didn't need to. You'd do the same for us. More kept coming. Within a week, there were 40 people camped around Red Mesa, working from dawn to dusk, clearing debris, laying foundations for new buildings, helping where they could. Clara set up a temporary kitchen in one of the outbuildings that had survived. It wasn't much, a makeshift stove, rough tables, limited supplies. But she made it work. Cooked massive meals for the growing crowd of workers, stretched provisions further than they should have gone, made coffee by the gallon. She'd thought cooking for 20 men was hard. Cooking for 40 was something else entirely. But people kept complimenting her food, kept coming back for seconds, kept telling her she was doing an amazing job. And slowly, Clara started to feel less like a city girl playing frontier and more like someone who actually belonged here. One evening, a woman approached her at the makeshift kitchen. She was older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and kind eyes. You're Clara Whitmore? Yes. I'm Margaret Donovan. My husband owns the ranch 10 miles south. I wanted to thank you. Clara blinked. For what? For what you did during the siege. My husband's men talked to some of your boys. They said you kept everyone organized, kept them from panicking. That's not easy when bullets are flying. I did what needed doing. That's exactly what I mean. Margaret smiled. Most women out here, myself included, we support our men. We keep homes running, but you kept a siege together. That's different. That's special. Clara didn't know what to say to that. Margaret patted her arm. You're one of us now, frontier through and through. Don't let anyone tell you different. She walked away, leaving Clara standing alone by the fire, feeling something warm and complicated in her chest. Rhett found her there an hour later. You all right? Yeah, just thinking. About? Clara gestured at the camp. At all the people working to rebuild what had been destroyed. About this. About how everyone just showed up to help. I didn't expect that. Frontier code, Rhett said. Your neighbor's trouble is your trouble. Your fight is our fight. It's not about liking each other. It's about surviving. Is that why you helped me, back in Black Hollow? He was quiet for a moment. Partly. And the other part? Rhett looked at her, and Clara saw something in his eyes she'd been pretending not to see for weeks, something that made her heart beat faster. The other part is complicated, he said finally. I'm not afraid of complicated. Maybe you should be. Clara stepped closer, close enough to see the scar on his eyebrow, the lines around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when he was trying not to say something. Rhett, the house is gone. The barn is gone. Half your supplies are gone. You almost lost everything. I know. But you didn't lose your men, didn't lose this place, didn't lose... She hesitated. Didn't lose me. His expression shifted, became more vulnerable. Didn't want to. Then stop treating me like I'm something you have to protect from the truth. I know what this place is. I know what you are. I'm still here. Clara, I'm still here, she repeated firmly. Rhett reached out slowly, the same careful way he had once before, and touched her face. His hand was rough, scarred from years of hard work and violence, but his touch was gentle. You should have run the moment Tommy told you about me, about my reputation, about the men I've killed. Probably. You should run now, while you still can. Not going to. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man. He almost smiled at that. Then his expression got serious again. If you stay, if we do this, it's not going to be easy. I've got enemies. Always will. And being with me means being a target. I was already a target, survived that just fine. This is different. How? Because now I care what happens to you, Rhett said quietly. And that makes you vulnerable. Makes me vulnerable. Clara understood what he was really saying, that caring about someone in a place this dangerous, this violent, was itself a kind of risk. That love, if that's what this was, could be used as a weapon against you. Then we'll be vulnerable together, she said. Rhett looked at her for a long moment. Then finally, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't like the kisses in Marcus Pemberton's letters, flowery descriptions of romance that had never existed. It was real, rough and honest, and tasting like wood smoke and exhaustion. The kiss of two people who'd survived something terrible together and come out the other side changed. When they pulled apart, Clara was breathing hard. Rhett rested his forehead against hers. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish," he said. "Can I be both?" He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rough and surprised. "Yeah, I guess you can." They stood there in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the camp of workers and the skeleton of what used to be Red Mesa Ranch. It wasn't romantic, wasn't pretty, but it was theirs. And for the first time since stepping off that train in Black Hollow, Clara felt like she'd finally found where she belonged. The rebuilding continued through June. The main house went up first, smaller than the original but sturdier, built with better lumber and more careful planning. The barn came next, designed to be more fire-resistant. Then the outbuildings, the corrals, the fencing. Clara worked alongside everyone else. She'd traded her cook's apron for work clothes, spent her days hauling timber and hammering nails and learning skills she'd never imagined needing. Her hands, which had once been soft and trained for needlework, were now calloused and capable. Her arms had muscle. Her skin was tanned from the sun. She looked nothing like the woman who'd arrived in December. Felt nothing like her either. "You're getting good at that," Tommy observed one afternoon, watching Clara expertly measure and cut a board. "I had a good teacher." "Yeah, well, don't tell Pike I said this, but you're better with a saw than half the men here." Clara grinned. "Your secret's safe." The work was hard, but there was something satisfying about it, about seeing the ranch rise from the ashes, about knowing she'd helped build it with her own hands. And every evening, after the work was done and everyone had eaten, Clara would find Rhett somewhere on the property. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset turn the plains gold. One night, sitting on the partially completed porch of the new house, Rhett said, "I'm thinking about expanding." "Expanding what?" "The ranch. Got an offer from a neighboring homestead. Family's moving back east. Wants to sell. It's good land. More cattle, more space. Could make Red Mesa one of the biggest operations in the territory." Claire considered this. "That mean more men to feed?" "Probably double what we had before." "Then we'll need a bigger kitchen." Rhett smiled. "That what you want? To keep cooking? I want to be part of whatever this becomes. If that means cooking, fine. If it means something else, that's fine too." She looked at him. "What do you want?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I want to build something that lasts. Not just a ranch, but something bigger. A place people can count on. Where families can settle and know they'll be safe." "That's ambitious." "Too ambitious?" "No," Clara said. "I think it's exactly ambitious enough." They sat there in this gathering dusk, and Clara realized that somewhere along the way, Rhett's dream had become her dream too. She wanted to see Red Mesa grow, wanted to be part of building something that mattered, wanted to build it with him. By mid-July, the ranch was functional again. Not finished, there was still work to do, but livable. The workers started heading back to their own homes, their own lives. Red Mesa settled back into its routine, though everything felt different now. The men treated Clara differently. Not as an outsider or even as the cook, but as someone who'd proven herself in the worst possible way. They asked her opinion on things, deferred to her judgment. Pike even started calling her boss lady, as a joke that wasn't entirely a joke. And Clara found herself settling into a new role. Not just cooking, though she still did that, but managing supplies, handling correspondence with suppliers, even helping negotiate contracts. The skills she'd learned as a school teacher, organization, planning, dealing with difficult people, turned out to be useful on a ranch. She was becoming what the territory would eventually call her, the Queen of Red Mesa, though that title was still months away. In late July, Rhett had to leave for 2 weeks to deal with the cattle purchase from the neighboring ranch. He was reluctant to go, still nervous about leaving Clara after what had happened. "I'll be fine," she assured him. "The brothers are in jail awaiting trial. Their hired men are scattered. There's no immediate threat that we know of. Rhett, I survived a siege. I can handle 2 weeks of running the ranch." He looked at her seriously. "I know you can. That's not what worries me." "Then what does?" "That you'll realize you don't need me anymore." Clara laughed. "That's the stupidest thing you've ever said." "Is it?" She grabbed his hand, laced her fingers through his. I choose to be here. Not because I need you, but because I want to be with you. There's a difference. Rhett studied their joined hands. When I get back, we should talk. About the future. About making this official. Clara's heart jumped. Official how? However you want. He met her eyes. I'm not good with words. Not like those fancy men you probably knew back east. But I know what I want. And I want you to stay. Permanently. It wasn't a proposal. Not quite. But it was close enough that Clara's breath caught. We'll talk when you get back, she agreed. He left the next morning with Tommy and 2 other men. Clara watched them ride out, then turned to face Red Mesa Ranch. Her ranch now, at least temporarily. Time to prove she could actually run the place. The first week went smoothly. Clara managed the daily operations, handled a dispute between 2 ranch hands, dealt with a supplier who tried to overcharge for lumber. By the end of it, she felt confident. Capable. The second week was when things got interesting. A rider appeared on the 8th day, a young man Clara didn't recognize. He looked exhausted, his horse lathered with sweat. Miss Whitmore? That's me. Message from the territorial marshal. He handed over a sealed envelope, said it was urgent. Clara tore it open, read quickly. Her blood went cold. The Brennan brothers had escaped, broke out of jail 2 days ago with help from outside. They'd killed a deputy during the escape. Were considered armed and extremely dangerous. And according to reports, they were headed back toward Red Mesa. Clara read the letter twice, making sure she understood. Then she looked up at Pike, who'd appeared at her shoulder. Get everyone together, she said calmly. Right now. 10 minutes later, every man on the ranch was assembled in the yard. Clara stood in front of them, the marshal's letter in her hand. The Brennan brothers escaped custody. They're likely coming back here for revenge. Could be days away, could be hours. Either way, we need to be ready. Silence. Then one of the older hands spoke up. Boss isn't here. Maybe we should wait for him to get back before... There's no time to wait, Clara interrupted. If they come, they come. We need to prepare now. What do you suggest? Pike asked. Clara thought fast. We turn this place into a fortress. Board up windows. Create defensive positions, station lookouts on the high ground, stock ammunition, prepare for a siege. We already went through one siege, someone pointed out, barely survived. Which means we know exactly what mistakes not to make this time. Clara looked around at the assembled men. I know you're scared, I'm scared too, but we have 2 choices. We run or we stand, and I don't know about you, but I'm done running. She waited, watched the men exchange glances. Waited for someone to challenge her authority, to say they should wait for Rhett, to argue that a woman couldn't lead them through this. Instead, Pike stepped forward. I'm with her. Anyone else? One by one, hands went up. Tommy, Wilson, even the men who'd been skeptical of Clara from the beginning. All right then, Clara said. Let's get to work. Mud, Clara sounded. They spent the next 2 days transforming Red Mesa into a defensible position. Windows were reinforced. Ammunition was distributed. Rifles were cleaned and loaded. Watch rotations were established. Clara organized it all, drawing on lessons learned from the last attack. This time, they'd be ready. On the morning of the 3rd day, the lookout spotted riders. 3 of them, coming from the west. Clara grabbed a spyglass, looked. Her stomach dropped. The Brennan brothers. All 3. And they'd brought friends. She counted at least 6 other riders. 9 against 14, but 9 who wanted blood. Positions, Clara shouted. Men scattered to their assigned posts. Clara took a position in the new house, rifle in hand. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. The riders approached slowly, stopped just outside rifle range. Cade Brennan, throat still bruised from where Rhett had nearly strangled him, cupped his hands around his mouth. Clara Whitmore! We know Callahan's gone. Send out anyone who doesn't want to die, and we'll let them leave. Clara moved to the window. Last time you came here, you lost. Leave now or lose again. Cade laughed. Last time we were stupid. This time we're prepared. We got dynamite. We got men, and we got all the time in the world. He wasn't bluffing. Clara could see the dynamite bundles strapped to saddles. They were going to blow the place apart. What do we do? Tommy hissed from his position nearby. Clara's mind raced. 14 men against 9, but the 9 had explosives, had nothing to lose, were driven by revenge. They needed help. Wait. Clara remembered the neighbors who'd come to help rebuild. Remembered Margaret Donovan saying, "Your fight is our fight." Remembered the frontier code Rhett had explained. "Tommy," she said quickly, "how fast can you ride to the Donovan ranch?" 20 minutes. Why? Because we're about to call in every favor we're owed. Ride to Donovan's. Tell them we're under attack. Tell them we need help. Then ride to the next ranch and the next. Spread the word. That'll take hours. Then we hold for hours. Clara looked at him. Can you do it? Tommy nodded. I can do it. He slipped out through a back exit while the Brennans were still shouting threats. Clara watched him disappear toward the eastern horizon, then turned back to the siege. Listen up, she called to her men. Help is coming, but we need to buy time. Do not waste ammunition. Do not take unnecessary risks. We make every shot count. Cade's patience ran out. Have it your way. The attack began. But this time, Red Mesa was ready. The first stick of dynamite hit the ground 30 feet from the house and exploded with a roar that shook the windows. Dirt and rocks sprayed upward in a fountain of destruction. Clara's ears rang from the blast, but she forced herself to stay focused. Hold fire, she shouted. Wait until they're in range. The Brennan brothers and their hired guns spread out, using the explosion as cover to advance. They were smarter this time, moving in patterns, never staying exposed for long. Professional, calculated. Clara tracked one rider through her rifle sights. He ducked behind the remains of an old wagon. She waited, finger on the trigger, breathing steady. When he emerged to move to the next position, she fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder. He spun, dropped his rifle, scrambled back behind cover. Not dead, but out of the fight. Nice shot, Pike called from his position across the room. Another explosion, this one closer. The concussion rattled Clara's teeth. A section of the newly rebuilt fence disintegrated. The Brennans were systematically destroying anything that could provide cover for defenders outside the house. They're trying to trap us inside, Wilson yelled. He was right. If they couldn't leave the house without being exposed, they'd be sitting ducks when the dynamite ran out and the real assault began. Clara's mind raced through options. They needed to disrupt the attack pattern, needed to make the Brennans reactive instead of proactive, needed the water tower, she said suddenly. Pike looked at her. What about it? It's wooden, elevated. If we set it on fire, the smoke will blow east, right into their position. We need that water. We need to survive more. Clara was already moving, grabbing a lantern, checking the oil level. Cover me. Clara, just do it. She didn't give him time to argue, just ran for the back door, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other. Pike and two other men opened up with suppressing fire, keeping the attackers' heads down. Clara burst into the open air and sprinted for the water tower. It was 50 yards away across exposed ground. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. Something hot seared past her ear, too close. She kept running, lungs burning, legs pumping. She reached the tower's ladder and started climbing one-handed, the lantern swinging dangerously. Her burned palms screamed in protest, but she ignored them. 10 feet up, 15, 20. At the top, she threw the lantern as hard as she could at the base of the tower's support beams. The glass shattered. Oil spread. For a horrible moment, nothing happened. Then flames erupted. Clara half fell down the ladder, hitting the ground hard, and ran back toward the house. The fire caught fast, climbing the dry wood. Smoke billowed upward, thick and black, then shifted east on the wind exactly as she'd hoped. She made it back inside just as another explosion tore through where she'd been standing moments before. You're insane, Pike said, but he was grinning. The smoke did its job. Within minutes, visibility on the eastern approach was terrible. The Brennan brothers' carefully planned positions became confused. Men coughed and stumbled. Their coordination broke down. Red Mesa's defenders took advantage, picking off targets when they emerged from the smoke. 2 more attackers went down. A third retreated entirely, clearly having second thoughts about dying for Cade Brennan's revenge. They're falling back, someone shouted. But Clara knew better. She'd seen this pattern during the first siege. The retreat wasn't defeat, it was regrouping. Stay alert, she called. They're not done. She was right. 10 minutes later, the attack resumed from a different angle. The Brennans had moved north, circling around the smoke. They came hard this time, all 6 remaining men firing as they advanced. No more careful positioning, just overwhelming force. North wall, Clara shouted. Everyone to the north wall. Men scrambled to reposition. The house's northern side had fewer fortifications. They hadn't expected an attack from that direction. Windows shattered under the hail of bullets. Pike took a round in the arm and went down cursing. Wilson dragged him to cover. Clara moved to the northernmost window, aimed, fired, missed, aimed again. This time she hit her target, one of the hired guns. He stumbled but kept coming. The attackers reached the house, started prying at the barricaded door. The wood groaned under the assault. "They're getting in!" someone yelled. Clara made a split-second decision. "Everyone upstairs, now!" They fell back to the second floor, dragging Pike with them. The barricade on the north door finally gave way. Clara could hear boots on the floorboards below. Rough voices calling to each other. "How many rounds you got left?" Clara asked Pike. "Maybe 10. You?" 8. "Not enough. Not nearly enough." Pike met her eyes. "Clara, if this goes bad, it's not going bad. But if it does, I just want you to know you did good. Real good. Better than any of us had a right to expect from someone who showed up here without knowing which end of a rifle to hold." Clara felt her throat get tight. "Save the eulogy. We're not dead yet." Footsteps on the stairs. The attackers were coming up. Clara positioned herself at the top of the stairwell, rifle ready. The others formed a line behind her. This was it. When the first man came around that corner, they'd fire everything they had and hope it was enough. The footsteps got closer. Closer. Then, from outside, a new sound cut through the chaos. Gunfire. Lots of it. Coming from the south. The footsteps on the stairs stopped. Confused voices below. Clara risked a glance out the window and her heart leaped. Riders. Dozens of them. Pouring into the ranch yard from multiple directions. She recognized Margaret Donovan's husband leading one group. The rancher who'd helped rebuild leading another. Neighbors. Allies. Tommy must have reached them. The cavalry had arrived. What followed was swift and brutal. The Brennan brothers, caught between defenders inside the house and fresh reinforcements outside, tried to fight their way out. It didn't work. Within minutes, 2 of their hired guns were dead, 2 more surrendered, and the rest scattered. Cade Brennan himself made a run for the horses. He almost made it. Then a rope caught him around the chest and jerked him from the saddle. He hit the ground hard. Margaret Donovan's husband stood over him, rope in hand, expression cold. "You picked the wrong ranch to attack twice." The other 2 Brennan brothers were rounded up quickly. The whole assault had collapsed in less than 10 minutes once the reinforcements arrived. Clara lowered her rifle slowly. Her hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. Pike was being helped to his feet, his wounded arm bound with strips of cloth. Wilson was checking on the other men. Everyone was accounted for. Bruised, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. They'd survived again. Clara walked downstairs on legs that felt like water. Outside, the ranch yard was controlled chaos. Neighbors securing prisoners, checking the fallen, calling out to make sure everyone was all right. Tommy appeared, his face flushed from hard riding. "I got to Donovan's, then the Prescott Ranch. Then—" Clara grabbed him and hugged him hard. "You did perfect." Margaret Donovan approached, rifle still in hand. "You all right, girl?" "I think so. That was smart thinking with the water tower, and holding them off until we could get here." Margaret's expression was approving. "You've got iron in you, real iron." Clara almost laughed. Iron. Like Rhett, the Iron Wolf and his iron-spined woman. "Thank you for coming," she managed. "I didn't know if Of course we came. That's what neighbors do." Margaret looked around at the damaged ranch. "Though I'm starting to think you folks attract more than your share of trouble." "Yeah, we're noticing that pattern too." The territorial marshal arrived 2 hours later with a proper escort. This time, the Brennan brothers were loaded into a prison wagon with armed guards. No chances. No escape opportunities. Cade Brennan, being dragged past Clara, spat at her feet. "This isn't over. You hear me? It's not—" "Yes, it is," Clara said calmly. "You lost. Twice. And now you're going to hang for murder and arson and everything else. So yes, Cade, it's very much over." The marshal tipped his hat to Clara. "Miss Whitmore, heard you organized the defense. Impressive work. Just did what needed doing." "That's exactly what makes it impressive." He glanced at the assembled neighbors, the damaged ranch, the captured outlaws. Word's going to spread about this, about what happened here. You know that, right? I suppose. You're going to be famous, the woman who held Red Mesa through 2 sieges, who organized the frontier against raiders. They'll probably write songs about you. Clara didn't know what to say to that. Famous wasn't something she'd ever wanted. She just wanted to survive, to build something, to find a place she belonged. I'd really rather they didn't, she said finally. The marshal laughed. Too late for that, I'm afraid. After the marshal left with his prisoners, the neighbors stayed to help repair the immediate damage. More fences, more windows, more work that never seemed to end. But this time felt different. The work was lighter. People were laughing, telling stories about the fight, already turning it into legend. Did you see Clara with that water tower? Someone said. Ran straight across open ground like bullets were nothing. And that shot she made. Dropped that one fellow at 100 yards easy. I heard she killed 10 men herself. It was 1, Clara corrected. Maybe 2. I'm not sure about the second one. Details. Tommy waved dismissively. Point is, you were incredible. Clara excused herself and walked away from the crowd. Found a quiet spot near what used to be the barn and just stood there, letting the adrenaline finally drain away. She'd done it. Actually done it. Led a defense against armed raiders, survived a siege, kept everyone alive until help arrived. 6 months ago, she'd been a school teacher in Philadelphia who'd never held a gun. Now she was someone the frontier would remember. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Clara! She turned. Pike was approaching, his wounded arm in a proper sling now. How's the arm? I'll live. Barely grazed me. He stopped next to her. You know the men are calling you the Iron Queen now? Clara blinked. The what? Iron Queen. Boss is the Iron Wolf. You're the Iron Queen. It's got a nice ring to it. That's ridiculous. Is it? You just held off 9 armed men with 14 defenders, half of whom had never been in a real fight before. You organized a rescue. You set a water tower on fire to create a smoke screen. You did things most men couldn't do. Pike shook his head. That's not ridiculous. That's legendary. Clara didn't feel legendary. She felt tired and sore and like her hands might never stop shaking. I was scared the whole time, she admitted. Of course you were. Only idiots aren't scared in a fight, but you didn't let the fear stop you. That's what makes you dangerous. Pike grinned. The Iron Queen of Red Mesa. Yeah, I like it. He walked away, leaving Clara alone with a title she hadn't asked for and didn't particularly want. But that night, sitting by herself and watching the stars come out, she had to admit there was something satisfying about it. Something that felt like vindication. Marcus Pemberton had abandoned her because he thought she was weak. Expendable. Just another woman who'd bend and break under pressure. He'd been wrong. Rhett returned 3 days later. Clara was in the temporary kitchen working on dinner preparations when she heard the commotion outside. Looked up to see Tommy running toward the house, grinning like a fool. Boss is back! Boss is back! Clara's heart did something complicated. She set down her knife, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked outside. Rhett was dismounting in the ranch yard, taking in the damage with a grim expression. Bullet holes. Scorched earth. The collapsed water tower. Evidence of yet another battle. His eyes found Clara immediately. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the yard. Then Rhett was moving, closing the distance in long strides. He grabbed Clara, pulled her against him, held her so tight she could barely breathe. What happened? His voice was rough, shaking. The Brennans escaped, came back. We held them off. You held them. Rhett pulled back to look at her face. Clara, you held them off? With help. Tommy rode for the neighbors. They came. We won. You could have died. But I didn't. Rhett looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to yell, wanted to do something other than just stand there holding her. Finally, he said, I shouldn't have left. You couldn't have known. I should have been here. Rhett. Clara put her hands on his chest. I handled it. We all handled it. That's what you're not understanding. We didn't need you to rescue us. We rescued ourselves. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or respect. Or both. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm starting to see that. Pike appeared, still wearing his sling. Boss, good to have you back. Pike, what happened to your arm? Bullet graze. Nothing serious. Pike grinned. You should hear what Clara did, though. Set the water tower on fire, organized the whole defense, kept everyone alive until reinforcements showed up. It was something to see. Rhett looked at Clara. You set the water tower on fire. We needed smoke cover. We needed that water. We needed to survive more. He studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. You're right, that was the right call. Over the next hour, the men filled Rhett in on everything. The escaped prisoners, the second siege, the arrival of the neighbors, the capture of the Brennan brothers, Clara's increasingly legendary defense of the ranch. Rhett listened to it all without interrupting. When they finished, he looked around at his battered, exhausted, but victorious crew. You all did good, he said simply. Better than good. You held Red Mesa when it should have fallen. That's something to be proud of. Wasn't us, Tommy said. Was mostly Clara. She's the one who kept us organized, kept us fighting. Then she's the one who saved the ranch. Rhett met Clara's eyes. Again. Later, after everyone had eaten and the sun was setting, Clara found Rhett standing near the ruins of the water tower. He was just staring at it, hands in his pockets. You all right? She asked. Trying to picture you running across open ground to set this thing on fire while people were shooting at you. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Clara, you could have died. I know. And you did it anyway. What else was I supposed to do? Let them kill everyone? She moved to stand beside him. Rhett, this is my home now. These are my people. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away. He turned to face her fully. My home. My people. You mean that? Yes. Even after everything? Even knowing what kind of life this is? Especially knowing what kind of life this is. Clara took his hand. I'm not that woman who stepped off the train anymore. I'm not soft or scared or waiting for someone to rescue me. I'm someone who fights for what's hers. Rhett's expression was intense. You're more than that. You're someone who leads, who makes hard decisions, who saves people. He paused. You're someone I don't deserve but want anyway. Clara's breath caught. Rhett, marry me. It wasn't a question, wasn't a careful proposal, just 2 words, rough and honest, offered like a challenge. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard, Clara said, but she was smiling. It's the only one you're getting. No poetry? No getting down on one knee? I'm not a poetry kind of man. You knew that when you decided to stay. Fair point, Clara pretended to consider. All right. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, but I have conditions. Rhett raised an eyebrow. Conditions? First, I run the household finances. You're good at cattle, but you're terrible with money. True. Second, I get a say in major decisions about the ranch. Not just cooking and cleaning. Real decisions. Already planned on that. Third, we build a school. For the ranch children and any settlers who come to the area. I want to teach again. Rhett was quiet for a moment. Then, a school. You really want that? I do. This territory is growing. It needs education, needs a future that's more than just cattle and violence. All right, we'll build a school. He pulled her closer. Anything else? Just one more thing. We rebuild bigger, better. We make Red Mesa the kind of place people want to come to, the kind of place that matters. That's a lot of work. I'm not afraid of work. No, Rhett said quietly, his hand cupping her face. You're definitely not. He kissed her then, and Clara kissed him back, and for the first time since stepping off that train in Black Hollow, she felt completely certain about where she was and who she was with. This was home, not Philadelphia, not some fantasy life Marcus Pemberton had promised. This rough, dangerous, beautiful place where she'd been forced to become someone stronger. When they pulled apart, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. The Iron Wolf and the Iron Queen, he said. People are going to tell stories about us. Let them. As long as we're alive to hear them. The wedding happened 2 weeks later. Simple ceremony, nothing fancy. Just the ranch hands, the neighbors who'd helped in the fight, and the territorial judge who happened to be passing through. Clara wore the only good dress she owned, the one she'd arrived in, now mended and altered. Rhett wore a clean shirt and looked uncomfortable the entire time. Tommy cried. Pike made inappropriate jokes. Wilson's arm was still in a sling, but he smiled through the whole thing.
Do you, Rhett Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Rhett, at the man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd seen strength in her before she'd seen it in herself, who'd built this rough life and was willing to share it with her. I do.
The judge pronounced them married.
Rhett kissed her, and everyone cheered, and for one perfect moment, Red Mesa Ranch was just happy. The celebration lasted into the night. Someone produced a fiddle. Dancing happened, though most of the men were terrible at it. Food appeared. Contributions from neighbors, dishes Clara had prepared, things that shouldn't have worked together but somehow did.
Margaret Donovan pulled Clara aside at one point. You did good, girl. Found yourself a good man and a good life.
I did, didn't I?
You going to keep fighting? Keep running this place? Clara glanced at Rhett, who was arguing with Pike about something, gesturing emphatically. Yeah, I think I will. Good. Territory needs more women like you, ones who don't back down. Margaret squeezed her arm. Proud to call you neighbor. Later, much later, after everyone had left or passed out drunk, Clara and Rhett sat on the porch of their rebuilt house. The same porch where they'd had so many conversations, where things had shifted between them. You think they're right? Clara asked. About the stories? Don't know. Don't much care either. Liar. You care. Rhett smiled. Maybe a little, but mostly I'm just glad you're here. That you stayed. That you're mine now. Ours, Clara corrected. We're each other's now. Yeah, that's better. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The ranch was quiet, peaceful. Hard to believe that just weeks ago it had been under siege. What do you think happens next? Clara asked. We rebuild. Again. Expand like we talked about. Build your school. Make this place matter. Think we can do it? Rhett took her hand. With you? Yeah, I think we can do anything. Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid weight of his presence. This man who'd been called the Iron Wolf, who'd killed and fought and survived everything the frontier threw at him, was hers now, and she was his. The Iron Wolf and the Iron Queen. It had a nice ring to it, after all. The night was cool and clear, full of stars that seemed close enough to touch. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. A horse whinnied, the sounds of a working ranch settling in for the night. This was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd dreamed about as a girl in Philadelphia, but it was real and hard-won and absolutely hers. And that made it perfect. The morning after the wedding, reality came back hard. There was no honeymoon, no romantic getaway to some distant city. Just work. The same brutal, endless work that defined life on the frontier. Clara was up before dawn, same as always, building the fire in the kitchen stove. Rhett appeared a few minutes later, already dressed for the day, looking like he hadn't slept much. Morning, Mrs. Callahan, he said. The name still felt strange, foreign, but also right in a way Clara couldn't quite explain. Morning, coffee's almost ready. They worked in companionable silence, falling into the rhythm they'd developed over months. Rhett hauling water, Clara starting breakfast. Small domestic tasks that felt bigger somehow now that they were married. Heard from the land office yesterday, Rhett said, pouring himself coffee. The Henderson property is officially ours. Papers should be ready by next week. The Henderson Ranch had been the neighboring property Rhett mentioned months ago. 2,000 acres of good grazing land, a creek that ran year-round, and a trading post building that had been abandoned for years. That's the one with the old post, right? Clara asked. Yeah, been sitting empty for 3 years. Owner went back east, never found a buyer until now. Clara's mind was already working. We could reopen it, the trading post. There's no general store between here and Black Hollow. People have to ride 15 miles just to buy basic supplies. Rhett looked at her over his coffee cup. You want to run a store on top of everything else? I want to build something that lasts, something bigger than just cattle. Clara turned to face him fully. You said yourself this territory is growing. More homesteaders every year, more families. They need places to buy goods, send mail, trade. Why shouldn't that place be ours? Because it's a lot of work. Everything worth doing is a lot of work. Rhett studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. All right, we'll reopen the trading post. You're in charge of it. Really? You organized 2 successful defenses of this ranch. I think you can handle a store. He set down his cup. But Clara, if we're doing this, expanding the ranch, opening a trading post, building your school, we need more people, good people. Can't run an empire with just ranch hands. Empire. Clara tested the word. That what we're building? Might as well aim high. Over the next few weeks, they threw themselves into the expansion. The Henderson property was absorbed into Red Mesa, doubling their land holdings overnight. The abandoned trading post was cleaned out, repaired, stocked with goods hauled in from the territorial capital. Clara spent long days at the post, learning inventory, negotiating with suppliers, figuring out what people actually needed versus what they thought they needed. It was different from cooking, but used the same organizational skills, same attention to detail. Tommy volunteered to help, mostly because he had a crush on a homesteader's daughter who lived nearby, and the trading post gave him an excuse to see her more often. You're transparent as glass, Clara told him one afternoon while they were stocking shelves. I don't know what you mean. Sarah Patterson, the blonde girl who comes in here 3 times a week to buy flowers she doesn't need. Tommy's face went red. She might actually need that flour. Nobody needs that much flour unless they're feeding an army. Clara handed him another sack to shelve. Just ask her to dinner. Stop dancing around it. What if she says no? Then she says no, and you move on. But you won't know unless you ask. Tommy looked miserable. How did you and the boss figure it out? You just knew? Clara thought about that. About standing on a train platform with nothing. About Rhett offering her a job when he had no reason to trust her. About months of quiet conversations and gradual understanding, and finally admitting what had been building between them all along. We didn't just know, she said. We worked at it, messed up a lot. Almost didn't happen at all because we were both too stubborn to say what we actually felt. She looked at Tommy. Don't make that mistake. If you like her, tell her. Life's too short and too hard to waste time being scared. Tommy nodded slowly. Yeah, okay. I'll ask her. He did, the next time Sarah came in. Clara made herself busy in the back room but could hear the stammered invitation, Sarah's surprised but pleased acceptance. When Tommy came to find her afterward, he was grinning so wide it looked painful. She said yes. I heard. I'm taking her to the harvest dance next month. Good. Try not to step on her feet too much. The trading post opened officially in September. Word spread fast, and within weeks, Clara was doing steady business. Homesteaders came from 30 miles away to buy supplies, sell goods, collect mail. The post became a gathering place, somewhere people could exchange news, catch up on gossip, feel connected to something larger than their isolated claims. Clara found she was good at it, good at remembering what people needed, good at negotiating fair prices, good at making the post feel welcoming even when she was exhausted and wanted nothing more than to sleep for a week. You're a natural, Margaret Donovan said one day, picking up supplies for her ranch, born merchant. I'm a school teacher who learned to cook out of desperation, Clara corrected. The merchant thing is new. Maybe. But you're good at seeing what people need and providing it. That's rare. Margaret paid for her purchases. Heard you're planning to open a school, too. Trying to. Need to find a teacher first. Why not do it yourself? Clara laughed. I'm already cooking for 30 people, running this post and helping manage the ranch. I don't have time to teach. Then delegate. Get someone to help with the cooking, someone to help at the post. You can't do everything yourself, Clara. It was good advice. Clara knew it, but finding people she trusted was harder than Margaret made it sound. The frontier attracted all kinds. Good people and terrible ones, hard workers and drifters, those seeking honest new starts, and those running from ugly pasts. The answer came from an unexpected direction. A woman appeared at the trading post one October morning. She was maybe 40, thin and weathered, with a child clinging to her skirts, and another on the way based on her obvious pregnancy. She looked exhausted, desperate. Can I help you? Clara asked. I heard someone said you might be hiring at the ranch. What kind of work are you looking for? Anything. Cooking, cleaning, washing. I can sew. I'm good with animals. The woman's voice shook slightly. My husband died 2 months ago. Cholera. I've got 3 children and no way to feed them. I'll work for room and board, don't even need wages, just need a place for my kids to be safe. Clara looked at her, really looked, saw the desperation, yes, but also saw determination, pride. The same thing she'd felt standing on that platform in Black Hollow. What's your name? Eliza Patterson.
Sarah's mother? Eliza blinked in surprise. You know my Sarah? She comes by the post. She's courting one of my husband's men. Clara made a decision. All right, Mrs. Patterson, we've got room. You can help with cooking and housework. Your children will have a roof and meals, and we pay fair wages. You're not working for free. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You don't know what this means.
I know exactly what it means. Clara came around the counter. Come on, let's get you settled. Eliza Patterson turned out to be a blessing. She was an excellent cook, better than Clara in some ways, with techniques passed down through generations. She was organized, hardworking, and grateful for the opportunity. Within a week, Clara had delegated most of the daily cooking to Eliza, freeing up time for other projects, including the school. They built it that winter in a clearing between the ranch and the trading post. Nothing fancy, just a single-room building with a wood stove, benches, a chalkboard Clara ordered from the territorial capital. But it was solid and weatherproof and big enough for 20 students. Finding a teacher proved easier than expected. A young woman named Catherine Mills arrived in the territory in November looking for work. She taught in Ohio before her fiancé died, and she'd decided to start over somewhere new. She was educated, patient, and willing to work for modest pay plus room and board. You sure about this? Rhett asked Clara the night before the school's opening. This is a big commitment. You're taking responsibility for other people's children. I'm sure. These kids deserve an education. Deserve a future that's more than just working ranches or getting married at 16 because there's nothing else to do. Not everyone will see it that way. Some folks think book learning makes kids soft, unsuited for frontier life. Then those folks are idiots, Clara said bluntly. Reading and arithmetic don't make you weak. They make you capable, give you options. Rhett smiled. There's my fierce wife. The school opened in December with 11 students. Ages ranged from 6 to 14, homesteaders' children, ranch hands' kids, even a few from Black Hollow whose parents were willing to make the ride. Catherine Mills proved to be an excellent teacher, firm but fair, able to handle the wide age range and varying skill levels. Clara stopped by often, listening to lessons, helping with supplies, watching something she dreamed about actually come to life. Education on the frontier, knowledge spreading in a place that had been almost purely survival-focused before. You're changing things, Catherine told her one afternoon, building infrastructure, creating community. That's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. No, but most people wouldn't even try. By the spring of 1888, Red Mesa Ranch had transformed. It wasn't just a cattle operation anymore. It was a hub. The trading post did steady business. The school had grown to 16 students. The ranch itself employed 40 men now, managing twice the cattle they'd had a year ago. Eliza Patterson ran the household kitchens efficiently. Tommy had gotten engaged to Sarah. Pike had been promoted to head foreman, and Clara found herself managing most of it. She still cooked sometimes, when Eliza needed help, or when Clara just wanted the simple satisfaction of creating something with her hands. But increasingly, her days were spent on administration, ordering supplies, negotiating contracts, handling disputes, making decisions about expansion and investment. She'd become, without really meaning to, the operational brain of Red Mesa Ranch. You're good at this, Rhett told her one evening. They were in what passed for an office, a room in the main house with a desk, ledgers, and increasingly complicated paperwork. Better than me. That's not true. It is. You see the whole picture. I just see cattle and land. You see the community we're building, the future. He leaned against the desk. I'm good at the physical work, the fighting when necessary. But this? He gestured at the paperwork. This is you. Clara looked at the ledgers spread across the desk. Income from the trading post. Expenses for the school. Payroll for 40 men. Supply orders. Contract negotiations with cattle buyers. It was overwhelming and exciting in equal measure. We're building something real, she said. Something that'll outlast us. Yeah, we are. Not everything went smoothly. In March, a group of businessmen from Black Hollow tried to shut down the trading post, claiming Clara was undercutting their prices and stealing customers. They brought legal papers, made threats, tried to intimidate her into closing. Clara responded by lowering her prices even further and extending credit to homesteaders. The Black Hollow merchants had refused to help. You're making enemies, Pike warned. Good. They can get in line behind everyone else who wants us to fail. The Black Hollow merchants backed off after 3 of them lost significant business to Clara's post. They tried one last time to pressure her, sending a lawyer to threaten legal action. Clara met with the lawyer in the trading post, with Tommy and Pike standing behind her for support. Mrs. Callahan, the lawyer said smoothly, my clients feel you're engaged in unfair business practices. They're prepared to take this to the territorial court. Let them, Clara said calmly. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm providing goods at fair prices to people who need them. If your clients can't compete, that's their problem, not mine. You're being unreasonable. I'm being a businesswoman. There's a difference. Clara leaned forward. Tell your clients that if they want to fight, they'll get one. But they won't win. I survived 2 sieges and an attempted lynching by reputation. I'm not afraid of some angry merchants. The lawyer left. The legal threats never materialized. The Black Hollow merchants eventually accepted that Clara wasn't going anywhere. You enjoyed that, Red observed that night. Maybe a little. You're getting scary, you know that? Good. Scary means people leave us alone. But not everyone was trying to cause problems. In April, the territorial governor himself visited Red Mesa on a tour of the region. He'd heard about the ranch that had survived multiple attacks, about the school being built for frontier children, about the trading post serving homesteaders. Governor Richard Harrison was a tall man with a politician's smile and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He toured the ranch, spoke with the men, visited the school, examined the trading post's operation. Impressive, he said to Clara and Rhett over dinner that evening. You've built something remarkable here, a model for what the territory could become. Just trying to survive and help our neighbors do the same, Rhett said. It's more than that. You're creating civilization, infrastructure, economic opportunity. Harrison looked at Clara. And I understand much of this is your doing, Mrs. Callahan. Clara was uncomfortable with the attention. My husband and I work together. Perhaps, but from what I've heard, you're the one who organized the defenses during the Brennan attacks. You're the one who opened the trading post in the school. You're the one negotiating with suppliers and managing operations. Harrison smiled. Don't be modest. You're extraordinary. After dinner, Harrison pulled Rhett aside for a private conversation. Clara couldn't hear what they discussed, but Rhett looked serious when he returned. What did he want? Clara asked. To offer me a position, territorial marshal for this district. Said they need someone who understands the frontier and isn't afraid to fight when necessary. Clara's heart sank. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. Rhett sat down heavily. It's a good opportunity, steady pay, real authority to clean up the lawlessness out here. But it'd mean leaving the ranch for weeks at a time, traveling across the territory, dealing with outlaws and raiders. It'd also mean danger, constant danger. Yeah. They sat in silence for a moment. Clara knew what the right answer was, knew that Rhett would be excellent as a marshal, that the territory needed someone like him, but she also knew what it would cost, the separation, the worry, the risk. What do you want to do? She asked finally. Don't know. Part of me wants to say yes, feel like I could make a real difference, but part of me just wants to stay here, build this place with you, watch it grow. Then stay. Rhett looked at her. You sure? I'm sure. We've got something good here, something we built together. I don't want to lose that. Clara took his hand. The territory can find another marshal, but Red Mesa only has one iron wolf. Rhett squeezed her hand. All right, I'll tell Harrison no. He did, the next morning. The governor was disappointed but understanding. The offer stands if you change your mind. Territory could always use a man like you. After Harrison left, life returned to its new normal. The school year continued. The trading post thrived. The ranch expanded further, absorbing another property and increasing the herd size again. Money was coming in steadily now, enough to not just survive, but actually invest in improvements. Clara found herself thinking about the future more, about what came next, about children maybe, though that was a complicated thought given how demanding their current life was, about growing old here, about the legacy they'd leave. "You're thinking too much," Rhett observed one night. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments at the end of brutal days. Just wondering what happens next. Next we keep building, keep growing, same as we've been doing. And then we do it again the next day, and the day after that. Rhett pulled her closer. "There's no grand plan, Clara. We just keep moving forward." It should have been frustrating, that lack of clear direction, but Clara found it oddly comforting. They were writing their own story, building their own future, nothing predetermined, nothing promised, just possibility. In June, Tommy and Sarah got married. It was a bigger celebration than Clara and Rhett's wedding had been. More people, more food, more festivities. Sarah was radiant in a dress her mother had sewn. Tommy looked terrified and ecstatic in equal measure. "Think they'll make it?" Pike asked Clara during the reception. "They're young and stupid in love," Clara said. "So probably." "You and the boss were young once." "We were never young. We skipped straight to old and tired." Pike laughed. "Fair point." Clara watched Tommy and Sarah dancing, remembered being that hopeful once, before Marcus Pemberton, before Black Hollow, before she'd learned how hard the world actually was. But she wouldn't go back. Wouldn't trade this life, difficult and dangerous as it was, for the false comfort of ignorance. "You did good," Rhett said, appearing at her side. "With Tommy, giving him advice, helping him figure things out. Just didn't want him making the same mistakes I did." "You didn't make mistakes, you survived. There's a difference." Clara leaned against him. "You're in a philosophical mood tonight. Wedding's making me sentimental." "The Iron Wolf doesn't do sentimental. He does for his wife." They stayed at the reception until late, dancing badly, drinking moderately, celebrating the simple joy of seeing people they cared about happy. It was a good night, the kind that made all the struggle worth it. Summer passed in a blur of work. The ranch was busier than ever. The trading post expanded, adding a section for mail service that made Clara an unofficial postmistress. The school prepared for a second year with even more students expected, and in August, Clara realized she was pregnant. She sat with the knowledge for 3 days before telling Rhett, not because she was scared, though she was, but because she wanted to be sure, wanted to understand what it meant for their future. Finally, one evening after everyone else had gone to bed, she told him, "I'm pregnant." Rhett, who'd been reading a letter from a cattle buyer, looked up slowly. "You're pregnant. About 2 months along, I think." He just stared at her. Clara couldn't read his expression. "Say something," she said. Rhett set down the letter, stood up, crossed to where she sat, knelt down in front of her and took her hands. "A baby. We're having a baby." "Yes." "Clara, that's..." His voice broke slightly. "That's everything." Relief flooded through her. "You're happy." "Happy." "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely unprepared." He pressed his forehead against her hands. "But yes, I'm happy." They sat like that for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. A child. Their child. Another person to protect and raise and love in this hard place. "Things are going to change," Clara said. "I won't be able to work as much. Not once the baby comes. Then we adjust. Delegate more. Hire more help. Whatever you need." "Rhett, I'm scared." "I know. Me too." He looked up at her. "But we've survived everything else the frontier threw at us. We can survive this too." Clara wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe they could raise a child here, keep them safe, give them a good life. But she'd seen how dangerous the territory was, how quickly things could go wrong. "What if I'm not a good mother?" she asked quietly. "You organized 2 successful defenses against armed raiders. You built a trading post and a school from nothing. You took care of 40 rough men and made them respect you. Clara, if you can do all that, you can definitely handle 1 baby." She almost laughed. "That's not the same thing." "Isn't it? Being a mother is about protecting and teaching and making hard decisions. You already do all of that." Rhett squeezed her hands. "You're going to be amazing." Clara hoped he was right. News of the pregnancy spread quickly despite their attempts to keep it quiet. Within a week, everyone at Red Mesa knew. The men were protective in new, sometimes absurd ways, insisting Clara not lift anything heavy, not work too long, not take any risks. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Clara told Pike after he'd literally taken a sack of flour out of her hands at the trading post. "Boss's orders, you take it easy. I've got 6 more months. I can't take it easy for 6 months." But gradually, Clara did have to slow down. The pregnancy was harder than she'd expected. Constant exhaustion, occasional nausea, and a growing belly that made everything awkward. She handed more responsibilities to Eliza, to Catherine at the school, to Pike at the ranch. It was frustrating. Clara had built her identity around being capable, being strong, being able to handle anything. Now her own body was limiting her. "This is temporary," Margaret Donovan reminded her during a visit. "Once the baby comes, you'll find your rhythm again. Motherhood doesn't make you weak, just changes what your strength looks like." Clara wanted to believe that. The baby was born on a cold February morning in 1889. The labor was brutal, 18 hours of pain that made surviving sieges look easy. Rhett stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, looking more terrified than Clara had ever seen him. Finally, just after dawn, their daughter arrived, small and red-faced and screaming with impressive volume. "She's got your temper," Rhett said, his voice shaking as he held his daughter for the first time. "And your lungs," Clara managed, exhausted but unable to stop smiling. They named her Hannah Rose Callahan. Hannah because it meant grace, and Rose after Clara's mother. She was perfect in the way all babies are perfect, tiny and helpless and completely dependent, and absolutely terrifying to be responsible for. The first few weeks were chaos. Hannah didn't sleep. Clara couldn't sleep. Everything hurt. Feeding was difficult. Clara felt overwhelmed and inadequate and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake thinking she could be a mother in a place this demanding. "You're doing fine," Eliza assured her. "All new mothers feel like this. I feel like I'm drowning. That's normal. It gets easier." Clara wasn't sure she believed that. But slowly, gradually, things did get easier. Hannah started sleeping in longer stretches. Clara's body healed. They found a rhythm, not a perfect one, but workable. And Clara discovered something unexpected. She loved being a mother, loved holding Hannah, loved watching her daughter discover the world, loved the simple satisfaction of keeping this tiny person alive and healthy. It didn't make the work less demanding, didn't make the sleepless nights easier, but it made everything feel more purposeful, like she was building something that mattered not just for now, but for generations. "You look happy," Red observed one evening. He'd found Clara on the porch, rocking Hannah to sleep under the stars. "I am happy. Even with everything, the work, the exhaustion, the way Hannah screams like she's being murdered every time she needs changing," Clara laughed quietly. "Even with all that, this is what I wanted. Not the fantasy life Marcus Pemberton promised. This, something real and hard-won and mine." Rhett sat down beside her. They watched the stars together, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From abandoned woman to Iron Queen, from desperate survivor to someone people looked up to, from nothing to everything that mattered. It had been brutal and terrifying and worth every moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing something in me when I was standing on that platform. For giving me a chance. For building this life with me." Rhett was quiet for a moment, then, "I should be thanking you. You saved this place, saved me, made me believe we could build something bigger than just surviving." They sat there in the darkness, their daughter between them, and Clara felt completely at peace. This was home. This was family. This was the future she'd fought for. And it was exactly enough. Hannah was 6 months old when the letter arrived from Philadelphia. Clara was at the trading post doing inventory while Eliza watched the baby when the mail courier handed her an envelope with her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. She turned it over, saw the Philadelphia postmark, and felt her stomach drop. Nobody from her old life had written to her in almost 2 years. She'd assumed they'd all forgotten she existed. She opened it carefully. "Dear Clara, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Elizabeth Morrison. You may not remember me, but I was a student in your literature class 5 years ago at Miss Harriet's school for young ladies. I was the shy girl in the back who never spoke. I'm writing because I recently learned what happened to you, how Marcus Pemberton abandoned you in Wyoming Territory. The whole story eventually came out when his wife discovered his correspondence with several other women. There was quite a scandal. He lost his position at the bank and his marriage. I wanted you to know that many of us who knew you were appalled by what he did. You were always kind to me when others weren't. You made me feel like my thoughts mattered. I've never forgotten that. I also wanted to tell you that I've heard stories about you, about how you survived the frontier, built a ranch and a school, became someone important out there. It made me realize that maybe what happened to you wasn't a tragedy after all. Maybe it was a beginning. I hope you're happy, Miss Whitmore. Or Mrs. Callahan, I suppose you are now. You deserve happiness after everything. With admiration, Elizabeth Morrison.
Clara read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. She felt strange, not angry, not sad, just distant. Like Elizabeth was writing about someone else entirely. Some other Clara who'd taught school in Philadelphia and believed men like Marcus Pemberton, that Clara was gone, dead maybe, or just transformed so completely that nothing remained of who she'd been. "You all right?" Tommy asked, noticing her expression. "Yeah, just a letter from someone I used to know, someone who remembered me differently than I remember myself." "That bother you?" "No, it's just strange, realizing how much I've changed." Tommy grinned. "Changed for the better, though. Can't imagine you as some fancy city lady." "I can barely imagine it myself." That evening, Clara showed the letter to Rhett. He read it silently, then handed it back. "You ever miss it?" he asked. "Philadelphia, that life."
Sometimes I miss the ease of it, running water, real streets, not having to worry about freezing to death or getting shot. Clara looked at Hannah, sleeping peacefully in her cradle. "But no, I don't miss the life. Don't miss the person I was." "Who were you?" "Small, scared, waiting for someone to give me permission to exist." Clara smiled slightly. "Now I'm large and still scared, but I stopped asking permission years ago." "Large," Rhett repeated, amused.
"You know what I mean. Taking up space, making noise, refusing to disappear just because it would be more convenient for everyone else. The Iron Queen doesn't disappear quietly. No, she definitely doesn't." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Clara thought about Elizabeth Morrison, still in Philadelphia, probably teaching now or married to some respectable man, living a safe, predictable life. Clara didn't envy her at all.
By the summer of 1889, Red Mesa Ranch had become something beyond what Clara and Rhett had originally imagined. The ranch itself employed 60 men now. The trading post served over 200 regular customers. The school had 23 students and needed a second teacher to handle the load. More importantly, a community had formed around these institutions. Homesteaders who'd been scattered and isolated now had a center point, a place to gather, trade, socialize, get help when needed. Red Mesa had become the beating heart of the region, and Clara found herself at the center of most of it. "You're everywhere," Pike observed one afternoon. "Trading post in the morning, ranch business at noon, school in the afternoon, back to the post by evening. When do you actually rest?"
"When I'm dead." "That's not funny. Wasn't joking." But Pike had a point. Clara was stretched thin, trying to be involved in everything. Motherhood added another layer of complexity. Hannah needed attention, needed care, needed her mother present and not constantly distracted by work. Something had to give. Clara spent a week thinking about it, then called a meeting with her key people. Rhett, Pike, Eliza, Catherine from the school, and Martin Webb, who'd taken over much of the trading post's day-to-day operations. "We need to reorganize," Clara said without preamble. "I've been trying to manage everything personally, and it's not sustainable. We're too big now. We need clear responsibilities and people empowered to make decisions without running everything past me." She outlined her proposal. Pike would have full authority over ranch operations, hiring, work assignments, discipline. Eliza would manage the household and food operations completely. Catherine would run the school independently, only consulting Clara on major issues. Martin would handle the trading post's daily operations. "What about you?" Rhett asked. "I'll focus on strategy, long-term planning,
managing relationships with suppliers and the territorial government, and being a mother. Clara looked around the room. I can't do everything anymore. Don't want to. We've built something too big for one person to control. That's good. That's progress. There was silence. Then Pike said, About damn time you admitted you're not superhuman. Everyone laughed, breaking the tension. So you're all comfortable with this? Clara pressed. Taking on more authority? Been ready for years, Pike said. Just been waiting for you to let go. I don't let go easily. We've noticed. The reorganization worked better than Clara expected. Freed from day-to-day management, she could focus on bigger picture issues. Negotiating better contracts with cattle buyers, establishing relationships with incoming territorial officials, planning expansion into additional services, maybe a proper bank or a telegraph office when the lines eventually reached them, and spending time with Hannah, who was growing faster than seemed possible. The baby who'd screamed constantly was becoming a curious, energetic little person who wanted to touch everything and explore constantly. She's going to be trouble, Rhett said one afternoon, watching Hannah determinedly try to climb out of her crib despite being far too small to succeed. She's our daughter. Of course she's going to be trouble. Fair point. In September, the territorial capital newspaper ran a story about Red Mesa Ranch. The reporter had visited a month earlier, interviewed Clara and Rhett extensively, toured the facilities. The resulting article was surprisingly positive. In the harsh wilderness of Wyoming territory, it read, one finds pockets of civilization that offer hope for the region's future. None more impressive than Red Mesa Ranch, where Rhett and Clara Callahan have built not just a cattle operation, but a true community. Their trading post serves settlers for 30 miles in every direction. Their school educates frontier children who would otherwise grow up illiterate. Their ranch provides employment and stability in a region known for violence and chaos. Of particular note is Mrs. Clara Callahan, who arrived in the territory just 2 years ago as an abandoned woman with nothing. Through determination and intelligence, she has become what locals call the Queen of Red Mesa, a force for progress and civilization in an untamed land. Her story is one of remarkable transformation and serves as an example of what the American frontier can be at its best. Clara read the article with mixed feelings. The praise was nice, but being held up as some kind of symbol felt uncomfortable. She wasn't trying to be an example. She was just trying to survive and build something worthwhile. You're famous now, Tommy teased. Going to start charging for autographs? Don't even joke about that. But the article had consequences. More people started showing up at Red Mesa, reporters wanting interviews, settlers seeking work, entrepreneurs proposing business ventures. The attention was overwhelming. We should probably capitalize on this, Rhett said pragmatically. Use the publicity to attract investment. Expand faster. Or we could just keep doing what we're doing. Clara, we've got momentum. We should use it. They argued about it for days. Clara was cautious about growing too fast, about attracting the wrong kind of attention. Rhett saw opportunity. Finally, they compromised. They'd accept some investments and partnerships, but carefully. No losing control of what they'd built. Over the next 6 months, Red Mesa continued evolving. A proper bank opened, managed by a man from Denver who'd read about the ranch and saw opportunity. A telegraph office was established once the lines reached them. The trading post expanded again, adding more goods and services. And Clara found herself becoming something she'd never intended, a public figure. People sought her opinion on territorial matters, asked her advice on starting businesses, wanted her endorsement for various projects. It was exhausting and strange and sometimes exciting. You're good at this, Margaret Donovan observed during one of her visits. The politics, the networking, building coalitions. I don't feel good at it. I feel like I'm making it up as I go. That's what everyone does. The difference is you're making it up successfully. In the spring of 1890, Clara got pregnant again. This time, she was less terrified and more pragmatic about it. She knew what to expect, knew she could handle it, knew her support system was strong enough to manage while she dealt with pregnancy and eventual childbirth. Their son was born in December, an easier delivery than Hannah's had been. They named him James Callahan, after Rhett's father. He was quieter than Hannah had been as an infant, more content to just observe the world calmly. 2 children, Rhett said, holding James while Hannah climbed on his lap, demanding attention. We're becoming a real family. Were we not real before? You know what I mean. Growing, putting down roots that go deeper than just us.
Clara understood.
Children changed the calculation, changed what they were building and why. It wasn't just about survival anymore, or even success. It was about legacy, about creating something that would outlast them. That summer, the territorial legislature passed through on their way to the capital. They stopped at Red Mesa for supplies and ended up staying 2 days, impressed by what they found. One of the legislators, a man named Howard Douglas, sought out Clara specifically. "Mrs. Callahan, I wanted to discuss something with you. We're establishing a territorial board to oversee education standards, setting curriculum requirements, teacher certification, that sort of thing. We'd like you to serve on the board." Clara was surprised. "I'm not sure I'm qualified. You built a functioning school in the middle of nowhere. You understand frontier education needs better than anyone in the capital. That makes you exactly qualified." Douglas smiled. "It would require traveling to the capital quarterly for meetings, but the position comes with a small stipend and significant influence over how we develop education across the territory." Clara thought about it. The travel would be difficult with 2 small children, but the opportunity to shape education policy, to help other communities build schools like she'd built, that was significant. "Can I discuss it with my husband?" "Of course. Let me know by the end of the week." She talked to Rhett that night. He was supportive, but concerned. "That's a lot of travel, a lot of time away." "I know, but this is important. We could influence how the entire territory approaches education. We already did that by building our school, by proving it works. But imagine if every settlement had a school like ours, every child had access to education." Clara looked at him seriously. "This is bigger than just Red Mesa." Rhett studied her for a long moment. "You want to do this. Really want it." "I think I do." "Then do it. We'll manage. We always do." Clara accepted the position. Over the next 2 years, she made quarterly trips to the territorial capital, working with other board members to establish education standards that were rigorous but achievable for frontier schools. It was challenging work, often frustrating, but deeply satisfying. And it connected her to a network of people across the territory who were trying to build something better. Other women like her, mostly, determined, intelligent, refusing to accept that the frontier had to remain wild and lawless forever. "You're changing things, Wog," Catherine told her after one trip. "The standards you're pushing through will help hundreds of schools. Or they'll be ignored completely because frontier settlements do what they want anyway." "Maybe, but at least we're trying." By 1892, Clara was 30 years old and felt 50. The children were growing. Hannah was 3 and wild as a storm. James was 2 and methodical about everything. The ranch was thriving. The community around Red Mesa had grown to nearly 500 people. The school had 40 students and 3 teachers now. And Clara found herself thinking about the future differently. She'd spent years just trying to survive, then trying to build, then trying to manage what they'd built. Now, finally, she could think about what came next, what they wanted this place to become in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. "I want Red Mesa to become a real town," she told Rhett one evening. "Not just a ranch with a trading post. An actual incorporated town with a government and laws and everything that comes with that." "That's ambitious." "Everything we've done has been ambitious." "True." Rhett considered it. "We'd need more businesses, more permanent residents. Probably a church, though I know you're not religious." "I'm not. But other people are, and they'd want one. And we'd need to petition the territorial government for incorporation. That's a whole process. Good thing I know people in the territorial government now." They started the process that fall. It took 18 months of paperwork, negotiations, meetings, and bureaucratic nonsense. But in March of 1894, Red Mesa was officially incorporated as a town. Clara was elected as the first mayor, almost unanimously. "Mayor Clara Callahan," Pike said, grinning, "has a nice ring to it." "I hate you." "No, you don't." The mayorship added yet another responsibility, but it also gave Clara official authority to shape the town's development. She pushed for paved streets, proper water systems, fire safety regulations, boring infrastructure that nobody noticed until it wasn't there. "You're building civilization," Martin Webb observed one day at the trading post.
I'm building something that doesn't fall apart the first time things get hard, Clara corrected. There's a difference.
By 1895, Red Mesa had transformed completely. What had been an isolated cattle ranch was now a thriving town of over 800 people. There were businesses, churches, schools, even a small newspaper. The Territorial Railroad was planning a route that would pass within 5 miles of town, which would change everything again. And Clara found herself thinking about the woman who'd stepped off a train in Black Hollow 8 years ago, desperate and abandoned and believing her life was over. That woman couldn't have imagined this, wouldn't have believed it was possible. One afternoon, Clara was working in her office at the trading post when a stranger walked in. A woman, well-dressed, maybe 40 years old, with a nervous expression. "Can I help you?" Clara asked. "Are you Clara Callahan?" "I am. My name is Rebecca Curtis. I just arrived in town yesterday. My situation is similar to what yours was, I think. I was engaged to a man who brought me west and then abandoned me. I have no money, no family, nowhere to go." The woman's voice shook. "Someone in Black Hollow told me to come here. Said you might help." Clara looked at Rebecca Curtis and saw herself 8 years ago, scared and desperate, but still fighting. "Sit down," Clara said gently. "Tell me what skills you have. I can keep books. I'm good with numbers. I managed accounts for my father's business back east." "We could use a bookkeeper. The bank needs help, and I've been looking for someone to manage the town's financial records." Clara made a quick decision. "You'll get room and board plus wages, fair wages. And if it doesn't work out, we'll help you get settled somewhere else. But you'll have a chance here." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You don't know what this means." "I know exactly what it means," Clara said. "I was you once. Someone gave me a chance. I'm just passing it forward." After Rebecca left, Clara sat alone in her office for a while, thinking about circles and second chances and how the frontier could break you or remake you depending on what you chose to do with the breaking. She'd been remade, completely and thoroughly, and now she was helping others do the same. That evening, Clara found Rhett in the barn, checking on a horse with an injured leg. Hannah and James were with him, helping in the way children help, mostly just getting in the way while asking constant questions. "Mama!" Hannah ran over and grabbed Clara's hand. "Papa says the horse is going to be okay." "That's good news." James, quieter as always, just leaned against Clara's leg and watched his father work. Rhett looked up. "Everything all right?" "Yeah, just thinking about how far we've come." "Long way from that train platform." "The longest way possible." Clara watched her husband with their children, watched the sun setting through the barn doors, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just satisfaction. "You ever regret it?" Rhett asked. "Any of it?" "Sometimes I regret the pain, the fear, the times I thought I wouldn't survive." Clara considered carefully. "But no, I don't regret the journey. Don't regret where it brought me. Even the bad parts? Especially the bad parts. They're what made the good parts possible." That night, after the children were in bed, Clara and Rhett sat on their porch. Their ritual for 8 years now. The town spread out below them, lights flickering in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. Their town, their community, their life's work. "What do you think happens next?" Rhett asked. "Next we keep building, keep growing. Watch Hannah and James grow up. Maybe have more children, maybe not." Clara leaned against him. "Maybe we just keep doing what we've been doing, taking care of people, building something that lasts." "That's enough?" "That's everything." They sat in comfortable silence, and Clara thought about the stories people would tell, about the Iron Wolf and the Iron Queen who built a ranch that became a community, that became a town, about the abandoned woman who refused to disappear. The stories would get some things right and some things wrong. They'd make it sound more romantic than it was, would probably leave out the parts where Clara was terrified and crying and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Would definitely leave out the monotonous daily work that actually built everything. But the core truth would remain. She'd survived. She'd built something. She'd taken nothing and turned it into everything that mattered. Years later, when newcomers to Red Mesa asked how the town started, the old-timers would tell various versions of the story. Some would focus on Rhett's cattle operation. Some would talk about the sieges and the violence. Some would emphasize the school or the trading post. But the version Clara liked best was the simplest one. An old ranch hand named Tommy, now married to Sarah with 3 kids of his own, would tell it like this. Back in '87, a woman got off a train with nothing but courage, met a man who recognized that courage and gave her a chance to use it. Together, they built something nobody thought possible. Built it through grit and work and refusing to quit when things got hard. Built Red Mesa. Built all of this. And when people pressed for more details, for the dramatic parts, Tommy would just shake his head and say, "The details don't matter much. What matters is they arrived with nothing but courage, and somehow that was enough to save us all." Clara lived to see Red Mesa become one of the most prosperous towns in Wyoming. Lived to see Hannah become a teacher like her mother, and James take over the ranch operations. Lived to see the railroad arrive, bringing more change and more growth. She lived to see women get the vote in Wyoming, and she cast her ballot proudly. Lived to see the territory become a state. Lived to see the frontier she'd known slowly transform into something more settled and safe. And through it all, she remained Clara Callahan, the Iron Queen of Red Mesa. The woman who'd survived sieges and built schools and refused to be anything less than exactly who she was. On her 50th birthday, the town threw a celebration. Hundreds of people showed up to honor her. The speeches went on for hours, people talking about everything she'd done, everything she'd built, everything she meant to the community. Clara endured it with patience and occasional embarrassment. When it was finally her turn to speak, she kept it brief. "Thank you all for coming, for the kind words, for being part of this community we built together." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "When I arrived here, I was nobody, had nothing, was completely alone. But this place, these people, gave me a chance to become someone, to matter. I hope we've created a community where others can do the same, where being abandoned or broken or lost isn't the end of your story, where it can be the beginning instead." The applause was thunderous, but Clara was already stepping down, done with speeches, ready to just enjoy the party. Rhett found her later, away from the crowd. "You all right?" "Just tired of being celebrated. I didn't do it alone. We all built this together." "True, but you were the heart of it, still are." Clara didn't argue. She knew what he meant, knew that while many hands had built Red Mesa, her vision had shaped it. Her determination had sustained it. Her refusal to give up had saved it more than once. She'd earned the title they'd given her all those years ago. The Iron Queen. As the sun set on her birthday celebration, Clara stood with Rhett, watching their grandchildren play in the town square. Hannah's daughter was 5 now, loud and fearless. James's son was 3, serious and thoughtful. "They're going to grow up in a different world than we did," Rhett observed. "Good, they should. That's progress." "You think they'll understand what it took to build this?" Clara considered. "Maybe not completely, but that's okay. They don't need to understand the struggle. They just need to appreciate what came from it, and hopefully they'll build something even better." "What could be better than this?" "I don't know, but I'm curious to see what they come up with." That night, lying in bed beside Rhett, her husband of almost 15 years, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of terror and triumph. She thought about Marcus Pemberton and wondered, briefly, what had happened to him. Hoped he'd learned something from his cruelty, though she doubted it. But it didn't matter. He was a footnote in her story, not the plot. She thought about the woman she'd been, the schoolteacher who believed love meant pretty letters and false promises, who thought safety meant being protected by someone else, who confused being chosen with being valued. That woman was gone, had died somewhere between Black Hollow and Red Mesa, between desperation and determination. In her place was Clara Callahan, wife, mother, mayor, builder of communities. Someone who'd learned that real love was working beside someone through brutal winters and endless challenges. That real safety came from your own strength, not someone else's protection. That being valued meant doing things worth valuing. She'd arrived with nothing but courage. And somehow, impossibly, incredibly, that had been enough. Not because courage alone could save you, but because courage got you to the next day, and the day after that, and eventually all those days added up to a life. A real life. One you'd built yourself with your own hands. "You awake?" Rhett asked quietly. "Yeah." "What are you thinking about?" "Just everything. How we got here. What it took. Whether it was worth it. Was it? Clara thought about Hannah and James, about the town spreading out below them, about the hundreds of lives that had been changed or saved or improved because of what they'd built, about the woman named Rebecca Curtis, who was getting a second chance just like Clara had gotten. Yes, she said simply. It was worth every moment. Rhett pulled her closer. Good. Because I wouldn't change a single thing. Neither would Clara. Not the pain, not the fear, not the backbreaking work. Because changing any of it would mean being someone else, living somewhere else, having a different life entirely. And this life, messy and difficult and wonderful, was exactly the one she wanted, the one she'd fought for, the one she'd earned. Clara fell asleep that night thinking about beginnings and endings, about courage and survival, about the difference between being rescued and rescuing yourself. And when morning came, she woke up the same way she had every morning for the past 15 years, ready to face whatever the frontier threw at her, ready to build, ready to fight, ready to keep moving forward, because that's what the Iron Queen did. That's what she'd always done, and that's what she'd keep doing until the very end.